What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 760. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, what's going on, man? How are you doing? How are things?
Good. Enjoying some Bloomburrow, getting to play that, and it's a good time. There's a lot of good Magic to be played between Bloomburrow, between Cube. We've got an Arena Open coming up in a couple weeks here. I'm just enjoying this. I feel like limited renaissance here.
Yeah, we're in a golden time for us limited players, no doubt about it. And of course, that's why you're here, dear listener, because you want to hear about Bloomburrow, rares, and mythic rares, and that's what we're going to do on this show. We're going to cover every single rare and mythic rare in Bloomburrow, and also the bonus sheet. That's right, singular bonus sheet, nice. And we're going to go over all those cards today in our second part of our set review. So before we do, we want to say thank you to each and every person who supports us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources if you'd like to support. And it really means a lot to us. Kind of ends up being the backbone of how content creators like Luis and I do our thing. So thank you very much to everybody who does so. Also, I want to say thank you to Ultimate Guard. They're the place to go to get whatever kind of protection you want for your cards, decks, collection, anything like that. You're going to need deck boxes, sleeves, that type of stuff, and Ultimate Guard has the best in the business. You can go to ultimateguard.com to check out their full array of products, and you can pick them up from your favorite online retailer or your favorite local game store. Thanks, Ultimate Guard. We do appreciate it. Luis, we're going to be putting a grade on each of these cards. Same grading scale we use for commons and uncommons, though it does tend to play out a little bit differently for rares.
Yeah, so we use an A through F grading scale with 2 subgrades, and we're going to start at the top with A's. A's are cards that are the best cards in the set, game winners. They're good from pretty much any situation, especially from behind, and also some cards that are really, really efficient. We're talking cards like Guide of Souls or Ocelot Pride, just the best cards in the set. Of course, in the Rare and Mythic review, we'll see a decent amount of these. B's are cards that actively pull you towards their colors, in this case, a color pair, because this is very much a 2-color set, maybe even a 1-color set. Actually, monocolor, I think, is actually pretty strong as well, thanks to all the hybrid cards. And we're talking cards like Marionette Apprentice or Malevolent Rumble, typically like the best commons and good to great uncommons. C's are cards that are playable, the pawns of limited, and they're pretty interchangeable. There's going to be some rares in this category, but rares tend to cluster at the 2 different poles, the A's and the F's. So C's are cards like Dog Umbra or Fanged Flames. And then D's are the cards that you don't really want to run. You're unhappy if they end up in your deck. We're talking cards like Electrozoa or Thriving Skyclaw, just kind of clunky, a little like a step behind. F's are cards that are just straight up unplayable. Like we're talking cards like Ruby Medallion or Urza's Incubator, cards that refer to types that aren't in limited, or cards that cost a ton of mana, that sort of thing. And then we have sideboard. These are cards that you wouldn't typically main deck, but they can be pretty good out of the sideboard. Not a whole lot of rares end up in the sideboard category because we're talking about cards like Meltdown. And then build around. These we will see definitely. These are cards that on their own don't do enough, but if you can put it in if you can build around it and you make your deck around it, they become really, really strong. So we're talking cards like Ether Revolt, which is going to be the best card in your deck when you enable it, but obviously doesn't fit into every deck.
Yeah, and those are usually the ones that I find the most exciting out of the rares and review, because that's where they take the build around uncommon angle, but they really let go. So sometimes you get some of the more exciting or ridiculous, in some cases, build around. So we'll be keeping an eye out for those as well. We're going to start things off just as we did, similar to what we did with the commons and uncommons. We rotate which color we start with. With the commons and uncommons, we do the gold cards as their signposts, but here we will start with just base colors, and it's going to be blue. Start with first card is called Mockingbird. It is blue X for a bird bard. It's rare. It's a 1/1 flyer. Bird bard. And it says you may have Mockingbird enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value less than or equal to the amount of mana spent to cast Mockingbird, except it's a bird in addition to its other types, and it has flying.
So one thing that you should note is you don't have to pay X as its mana value. You just have to spend that much on Mockingbird. So it costs 4 to copy a 4-drop. You break even on mana.
Oh, so really nice then.
Yeah, you're not overpaying, and that's pretty strong. I mean, you're not really going to get away with like copying a 6-drop for 2 mana, like Phantasmal Image sort of thing, but just getting to cast whatever the best creature is on the board and have it be a flyer is pretty decent. So I would say Mockingbird is like a B-. It's a solid card. You're pretty happy to have it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I would give it at least a B. I mean, aren't these cards normally quite strong? Like you're telling me this is straight up clone.
Yeah, it can't copy Offspring, so like you can't pay the Offspring cost in addition. And copying their stuff is a little bit worse than normal because each deck is so focused on what it wants to do. But Mockingbird still is a card that you're pretty happy to have. I just think that the format doesn't lend itself to having this be like a big part of your plan.
Okay, well, I'm going to go at least B on Mockingbird because flying in limited is awesome, right? And if I don't even have to pay a premium, to copy whatever the best thing on the battlefield is plus flying, I'm in. That's pretty sweet. Next is Portent of Calamity. This is actually the same cost. It's X and a blue. And it's a sorcery, though. It's rare. It says, reveal the top X cards of your library. For each card type, you may exile a card of that type from among them. Put the rest into your graveyard. You may cast a spell from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost if you exiled 4 or more cards this way. Put the rest of the exiled cards in your hand. Wow, this is one of those ones, Luis, that like if you just cast it and told me what it did, I would know, but reading it makes it a little bit muddled.
Yeah, basically you pay X and a blue and you kind of like a Troxa from the top X cards of your deck. You get one of each type. And if you do it's such that there's 4 different types exiled, you then get to cast one of them for free.
Yeah, well, that's a nice bonus.
It is, but you're just not going to get that bonus. So we're talking a card that I think is significantly worse than blue X draw X cards, which, to be fair, they're not printing blue X draw X cards anytime soon. I think that's even for them. And the new push to, Magic's gotten pushed over the last couple of years. That's still like a bit much. Mm-hmm. I think that this card's pretty bad. I don't know if it's like a straight F, but I just wouldn't put this card in my deck. And I would typically just advise against spending a bunch of mana and not affecting the board. Like compare this to the common for 4 and a blue that draws 3 cards and you can give them a tap fish to tap something down. I think that card's going to be better most of the time, up to and including because you get to give them a 1/1 to lock down their biggest attacker. Like I find that to be a pretty nice part of the card. Portent of Calamity, mostly just going to miss. I think it's an F. Yeah,
I think you're right. I mean, that's a good use case. What if I paid X equals 4 for this? What am I happy with? I mean, I would want to get 3 cards out of the thing if I'm going to dump 5 mana at sorcery speed in, right?
Are you going to get 3? You're going to get way less than 3 on average. I mean, you're going to get 2 most of the time.
I would say you would get 2 on average. Yeah, for sure. So I agree with you. If a D level common is better than this is probably an F. Next is Storm Chaser's Talent. This is blue for a class, an enchantment class. This is rare. And the base level is when it enters, create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. And then the level 2 is actually quite expensive. It's 3 and a blue. But it says when this class becomes level 2, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So you are getting like, a spell back straight up. So that's nice. And if you want to level 3 it, it's 6 more mana. So it's 5 and a blue. And it says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue and red otter with prowess.
This card's cool.
That's cool.
I mean, I have somewhat bad news, which is that blue-red really sucks. Like it's the worst color combination. And
bummer.
I mean, I trophied with it with this card. This card is very strong. If you can just play this, you get a 1/1 prowess, which often can trade off because you can like block a 2/2 and cast one of your cheap instants, which there are plenty of. And then later you're just like pay 4 to get a removal spell back, and then that hopefully buys you time to take a turn off, pay 6. Then you have Monastery Mentor going, and that is really strong. Like you will win the game because of this. So this is a B level card, probably like a B plus in that deck. The problem is that deck's kind of like a D. I think that you need some significant rare reasons to get into blue red otters. I just don't think it's that great of a deck, and I would not play this outside of almost exactly blue red. So Storm Chaser's Talent gets like a build around B with a pretty big asterisk there.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Next is Azure Beastbinder. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 rat rogue at rare. It's got vigilance, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or greater. And it says whenever it attacks, Up to one target artifact, creature, or planeswalker an opponent controls loses all abilities until your next turn. If it's a creature, it also has base power and toughness. Interesting. 2/2 until your next turn, so it can't block the Beastbinder.
Yeah, this card's pretty neat. It's pretty annoying. It's really hard to kill this thing in combat. To kill this in combat, you need to have 3 1/1s.
Yeah, seriously, that's interesting.
It can't be blocked by anything else. I mean, it can be blocked by like a 1/3 also, but and at 1/3 vigilance, it kind of, you know, the idea here is that like you can make their thing into a 2/2 and then this can block it on the way back. I found this card to play pretty well. It's a 2-mana play that in the early game is just going to keep pecking in for 1 and maybe making it so their plan doesn't work. Like you make it so their Valiant creature no longer has that ability and like, you know, they're not able to use all their cards. But in the late game, it's still totally fine. I have yet to see a board where this can't just attack. Like it is pretty difficult for that to be the case. Against rabbits, maybe they make a bunch of 1/1 tokens, but the Beastbinder is pretty solid. I would just give this a solid B. It plays really well.
Yeah, that looks awesome. I haven't played with or against yet, but I like the fact that it can also hit random other stuff like artifacts, or even if there's a planeswalker, you can shut that down. That comes up rarely, but when it does, it matters. Next is Dour Portmage. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 frog wizard at rare. Whenever one or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card. And you can pay 1 and a blue and tap it to return another target creature you control to its owner's hand.
Great card.
That's
I mean, just
awesome.
imagine how you would feel if they just have this thing in play. Like you can't use removal except on this. So, and if it's a 1/3, so some things don't quite kill it, but also like you just can't really attack them if they have mana up. Imagine you attack them with a ground creature. They're like, block with my 1/1, bounce it, draw a card.
Totally.
They can re-trigger ETBs. It's a lot for just 2 mana.
Does it become 2 mana intensive? I mean, it doesn't just come back to the battlefield like you are having to recast your stuff.
Yes, it is not just free, but you would like to combine it with like Clifftop Lookout, the 3-mana 1/2 that rampant growth's a land, or Pawn Prophet. Like you don't need to use this every turn. You bounce a Pawn Prophet once off this, you're drawing 2 cards. You probably can just not use this for a few turns while you play your other stuff. Right. But also, it's a 2-mana card. So like you're just not really investing that much in it. Yeah. I think that the Portmage is quite strong. I would give this a B+. Obviously, it's a frog card, but I would play it in any blue deck.
I love it too. You know, the key here is that they made it not sorcery speed also. That wouldn't have been surprised if that activated ability was sorcery only, but this really does allow you to keep yourself alive and keep the cards flowing. And we all also know how it goes. On activated abilities that effectively draw you a card every turn, at some point they become free. You've drawn enough cards that you've hit extra land drops that you wouldn't have hit otherwise, and now you got the machine rolling, making the Portmage a must kill. Next is Kitsa Otterball Elite. It's 1 and a blue for a 1/3 legendary otter wizard at Mythic Rare, and it's got vigilance. Sorry, I have people coming into the apartment to fix some stuff, so I just have to kind of ignore it. It's got vigilance and prowess, and you can tap it to draw a card and then discard a card. And you can pay 2, tap it to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, and you activate only if Kitsa's power is 3 or greater.
I mean, a 2-mana 1/3 looter with vigilance and prowess is pretty nice to start with. Like you're just going to be happy playing that card. And then it has this secret bonus where if you can get it up to 3 power, which obviously just means casting 2 spells as like the base level, but you could also potentially see giving it +1/+1, like trying to put a counter on it or something like that. You can start copying instants and sorceries, like copying a take out the trash and killing 2 things. Right. It's going to be a pretty effective play if you can ever make it. Yeah, Kitsa looks solid. I would give Kitsa a B. It's hard for me to look at these blue cards and not think about how the Otter deck really has been underperforming. Maybe that'll change. This is just week 1, but yeah, I mean, that has been my experience with it, and apparently other people's as well, because it does not have a high win rate.
Man, that's tough. Yeah, but you're right. Just the basics of vigilance, prowess, and looting for no mana. I mean, that's already like really good. I'm not surprised that this is a Mythic Rare. You know, they push this one a little bit, but yeah, at least a B for Kitsa. Just any blue deck would play a card like this, regardless of Otter synergies or anything like that. Next is Thundertrap Trainer. This is 1 and a blue for an Otter wizard. It is rare. It's a 1/2, and it has Offspring for 4. And it says, when this creature enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
The key here is like, do you have enough cards that trigger this? Like, that this can pick up?
Yeah.
And I would say that if you can do that, this card is really good. It's not just an otter card in that any deck that has the right density of spells will want to play it. But obviously that is going to be the otter deck more than anything else. So, keep that in mind. But it's a good card. The Thundertrap Trainer is like a B+ level card if you can get it to hit, 70% of the time or something like that.
Totally, because I mean, it plays really well at both casting costs, right? Like on 2, you just run it out there. You get a little bit on the board, and hopefully you replace it with a useful spell. But late in the game, you play 6 mana, and you get to dig twice for spells like that. You could easily come away with a little bit of a board state, but then 2 powerful spells in your hand for the next turn to take over the game. Next is
definitely a strong card if it's hitting.
If it's hitting, yeah, like you said. So is the most common thing just the spell stack, just removal, card draw, whatever?
Yeah.
I mean, that's it, right? That's like
kind of what you're looking for.
That's the whole joke.
Because not only does that give it a lot of spells to hit, but also this gets it plays into the control role of like kill your thing, play 6 mana to refill, got some chump blockers, that sort of thing.
Okay. What grade did you say?
I would say B+.
B, but you have to have that build around element where you can't just throw it into a deck that isn't well stocked. Next is Valley Flood Caller. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 Otter Wizard at rare. It's got flash. And it says you may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, birds, frogs, otters, and rats you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, and you untap them. Have you played with this card yet?
I played against it. I haven't played with it.
Yeah, I had a chance to play it, and I didn't take it. I took something basic over it.
Yeah, my main issue is that the otter deck and the deck with a lot of non-creatures isn't going to get that much benefit out of the second part of the mode.
Right.
So I don't think this card's very good. It looks like a C to me. Like I could construct a deck where you might want it, but I think most decks are just not going to be that worried about picking it up.
Yeah, I just don't put much equity on the first 2 abilities here. Like a 2/2 with flash is kind of whatever. It's not like you're ambushing creatures that often with that. And then giving non-creature spells flash, so anything like sorceries or, I guess your artifacts or whatever. When you actually look at the cards, there's a few times when it's slightly better to have it, like a sorcery speed removal becoming an instant speed removal is an upgrade. But a lot of the times it's kind of like a mana thing where you're just like, well, you didn't know this was happening and now I get to play it. So you feel clever, but it doesn't actually impact the game in a huge way. And like you said, setting up the last clause is difficult as well. Next is Eluge, the Shoreless Sea. This is 1 blue for a star legendary elemental fish. It is mythic rare. And it says Eluge's power and toughness are each equal to the number of islands you control. Oh, we got a little callback here. And then whenever Eluge enters or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. It's an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it. And it says the first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs blue or 1 generic mana less to cast for each land you control with a flood counter on it.
Pretty cool card. It is going to be at least a 3 if you're casting it, and then you can immediately make it a 4 because you can put it whatever your non-island land. So it's going to be like a 4 mana 4/4, maybe larger, and it makes your spells cheaper. It even takes blue off the cost, so you can actually start by like playing this and then playing like a cheapish spell, even if you're tapped out, which is kind of sweet.
That's interesting, yeah.
And the main downside, of course, it costs triple blue. I just think like if you can draft like mono blue, this card's honestly an A. Like it's going to be a 4 mana 4/4 or 5/5 that makes your first spell free. Imagine casting this on turn 5 and playing a 5 mana blue spell. Like
that's insane.
That is awesome. I just think that like a lot of the time you're not going to end up being able to cast this card when you want to. So
and then this thing will get bigger. as the game progresses as well.
As you play more islands, this just keeps getting bigger, or any lands, and it turns them into islands.
Yeah, so this is a good case for a first main phase, play your mountain, attack, turn it into an island. Now your illusion's bigger.
Exactly, okay. Yeah.
Do you think that the designers were cowards by not making the flood counters turn the thing into just an island and let you put it on your opponent's stuff?
I think they exhibited good judgment by not doing that, is what I think.
Okay. So not cowards. Got it.
Yeah,
so what grade do we want to give
them?
that card would have happened, 20, 30 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. I would say that I would consider it a build around. And I think it's a build around like B. Like it's going to be hard to be actual mono blue. Mm-hmm. And that means sometimes this will be stuck in your hand. So it's like a build around B. And if you're literally mono blue, 17 islands, it is closer to an A than a B, especially if you can get some good spells to play with it.
How many islands do you want to put if you're not mono blue?
Like 12 or something. 13 12? Is kind of my inclination. Okay. You want to cast this like pretty fast.
Yeah, that's tough. Okay, next card is called Kidnap. It is 2 blue for an enchantment aura. It's rare. And it has gift a card. This thing enchants a creature. You control the enchanted creature. And it says when it enters, tap enchanted creature. If the gift wasn't promised, put 3 stun counters on it.
Yeah. How bad can a control magic be before it's not good? This is in some ways close because you either give them a card, in which case your thing is still tapped, by the way. Like it comes in and taps it. So you're not even blocking with it no matter what. And then which is kind of rough. And then if you are able to fade dying, you can not give them a card and just like set the creature aside. You basically had 4 mana to kill their creature, and in 3 turns you get a version of it. Mm-hmm. That's pretty sweet. But I would say overall Kidnap it's still a good card. I would say it's like a B+. It's just think of it as a removal spell that sometimes can end up doing something for you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking is like, what if I just consider this this is noteworthy, 2 blue pacifism. That's a lot, right? I mean, I don't think I'd be very excited to play that, considering that they can bounce it or mess with it or, kill the kidnap or whatever. It does have the upside, the additional upside of sometimes you actually just straight up get the card. I don't know, man. B+ sounds a little high to me.
Well, I wouldn't say pacifism because you eventually get something out of it.
Yeah, I'm saying a lot of times it'll play out that you play it and then if you don't give them the
one
card,
way or another,
right? Then the game ends. Which is fine. I don't think that's bad or anything, and I do like that there is upside. Like sometimes definitely they play some big scary bomb and you play Kidnap and go, you know what? Enjoy your card. I'm going to kill you with this in a turn cycle. Yeah, okay. Maybe a B for Kidnap. I mean, control magics are generally very powerful. Okay. Wishing Well is next. It's 3 and a blue for an artifact at rare, and it has tap. Put a coin counter on Wishing Well. When you do, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value equal to the number of coin counters on Wishing Well from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead, and then you can only do this whole thing at sorcery speed.
Clearly a build around. I don't think it's even a particularly great one, though I could see if you really have a curve of spells in your graveyard, if you're like, play Might of the Meek, draw a card, next turn, take out the trash, kill your thing, next turn, 3 mana spell. I'm not sure even which one at this point,
2 in a red does 4 damage or whatever.
Sure. I get Assault into the next turn playing the downdraft and like that. Well,
the next turn you could play Wishing Well, right? And just flash back the 1-drop right away.
Oh, I meant those are in your graveyard. You cast Wishing Well and you start with Might of the Meek into I see. Yes. So
I was thinking you play the 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and then you go 4-drop Wishing Well, play the 1, and then the 2, and then the 3. I mean, that is a powerful sequence in some ways.
Yeah.
Setup cost very high.
Yeah.
It is or less, right? Like if you overshoot, you can just pick the lesser costed spell and still be able to cast it, right? It says equal to.
No, you have to have a curve. Like, and the curve is.
I'm saying you can't go backwards.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, no. This is the setup cost is just ridiculous on this thing.
Yeah, it's just going to be too hard to make
it's
this
an
work.
F. I would give that an F. That's cool though. All right, come on, give me something sweet here. Season of Weaving. This is 4 blue for a sorcery at Mythic Rare. It says, what is it? Oh, what is this called? The little paw print thing?
Yeah, it's just you get 5 paws.
Paws, okay.
And then each mode costs paws. So this gives you 5 paws to start. You can pay 1 paw to draw a card. You can pay 2 paws to create an artifact or token copy of an artifact or creature you control. And you can pay 3 paws to return each non-land, non-token creature, or permanent rather, to its owner's hand. This card is really strong. I think the base case of this is you either draw 3 cards and make a copy of your best thing, or draw 1 card and make 2 copies of your best thing.
Okay.
If you're losing badly, you can cast the bounce version, which is a good option to have, especially since you probably make a token and then bounce everything. But it's pretty flexible. You could even cast this as a draw 5 if the board is completely stalled or you don't have a good thing to copy.
So return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand.
Yeah. So it doesn't bounce the token you just made, and
does it not?
It says non-token.
Oh, I see what you mean. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I misunderstood. Okay, yeah. So you get a token left over, and then I also get 2 cards?
Yeah. This card's really good.
If I don't want to make a token, wow.
Or if you have a good creature in play, you just make 2 copies of it and draw a card.
Well, we haven't even talked about the most obvious mode, right?
Draw 5.
Draw 5, baby. Let's go. What could go
Season
wrong?
of Weaving is good. I would just give it an A. It's just a powerful card to cast.
That's extremely powerful. Yeah, that reminds me of some of those 6-mana blue instants and stuff that they have like in the arena cube. You know, I can't remember what it's called, but, you know, lets you choose like 3 or 4 different things that are all awesome. Okay, so that's blue. I have to say, overall, there's a couple of decent rares here, but I'm not that impressed by these. Like these have high setup costs. They seem a little narrow. There's definitely a lot of attention paid to the blue-red sorceries and instants thing. And if that's not working, then that's going to take a big hit on the blue rares for sure.
Totally. Season of Weaving is really the only card I would be happy to first pick out of these, I think.
Yeah, that's tough. I do like the clone. I like Mockingbird still, but yeah, I'm not jumping out of my chair for it. All right. That moves us to black. Our first black card is called Iridescent Vine Lasher. It is black for a 1/2 Lizard Assassin at rare. It's got Offspring 2, so that's a nice cheap Offspring cost. And Iridescent Vine Lasher has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to target opponent. Wow,
Great
that
card.
is annoying. Man, that's
exactly
really
what the red-black deck wants. You can play it on turn 1 and it's totally fine, but you would prefer to play it on later turns, because having 2 of this card in play is just so obnoxious for your opponent.
Yeah.
I like the Vine Lasher at probably B+. I don't quite give it an A, but it is really good. You are going to be happy starting a draft with this.
Totally. And it's also extremely annoying. I've played against it, and it's like, especially when they offspring it, are you really going to start using real removal spells to break up 1 and then the second Vine Lasher? But if you just sit there and watch them ding you for 2 every turn and you don't have a good offense going, you do have to start considering it. Next is Scavenger's Talent. This is black for an enchantment class. It's rare. And it says base level is whenever 1 or more creatures you control die, create a food token. This ability triggers only once each turn. You can level it up to level number 2 for 1 and a black, and it says whenever you sacrifice a permanent, target player mills 2 cards. Oh, where are we going with this? And then level 3 is also cheap. It's only 2 and a black. It says at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice 3 other non-land permanents, probably foods. If you do, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So is level 2 like a legit alternate win con? Mill 2 cards is it's not exactly turboing them out, and it's likely that this is the only way you have to mill your opponent. So guess I'm assuming that you just point this at yourself most of the time.
Yeah, you probably are starting by pointing it at yourself, and then later in the game you will switch to doing them, like when you want to start getting lethal, or if your deck gets too low. And overall, I think that Scavenger's Talent is a pretty nice little build around, and If you can enable it, like it's great in the Squirrels deck, and the Squirrels deck is very good.
If you get to level 3 and trigger it, it says you may sacrifice 3 other non-land permanents. Will that trigger? Was that 6 cards worth from level 2?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
It's a combo. So this is definitely a builder run, but I like it. I would give it a builder run B. I would be pretty happy to have this in a green black deck.
And you like it just as black thing that makes a bunch of food in that deck too, right? Just
yeah. I mean,
base level.
You need to be getting something out of all of the things, especially like the first one. If the first one is good in your deck, like if you would kind of play that card, and there's squirrel decks, a lot of them would just play it for the first mode, then yes, obviously the rest of the modes are good.
Yeah.
So builder on B, and you're not going to see this outside of green black very often.
Cruel Claw's Heist is next. It's black for a sorcery at rare. It has gift a card. It says target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. Exile that card. If the gift was promised, you may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. Timing question, they do have the card that you gifted them by the time you look at their hand, right?
Yep, that's kind of the whole thing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. So, wow. I have to say, I'd be almost all of the gift a card cards so far. I've been like, I'm really going to try not to gift you a card, but here, I don't know. I kind of feel like it's more for me, like maybe I'll hit your really good bomb or something.
The way the timing works is you cast this, and it's either you could just cast it as Thoughtseize, right? That's one option. The second option, though, is you give them a card, and in exchange, you get a card. So you both get a card, except you then get to still take their best card, and that's the card you get.
Yeah.
So it's very rare that you shouldn't gift this, I think.
Yeah.
Like, unless if you have a ton of action in your hand, like, and you're not going to be short on casting spells, then you could just not, you don't want both players to draw a card. Because like they have 2 cards in their hand, you have 6 cards in your hand. You don't need a 7th card. So sure, we'll just take one of your 2 remaining cards and hope that my huge advantage wins you the game. But if you're behind on cards or you don't have good action, just in general, I'd say you should probably give them the card. Overall, I don't think this card is a very good fit for this format. Double black is a lot, and this is a really play to the board format, a very fast format. So you just don't want to spend a lot of time doing this sort of thing. I would say Cruel Claw's Heist is probably like a D.
Yeah.
I don't think you should put this card in your deck that often.
Yeah, it sucks because the pieces are here for this card to be good, but you need the card that you steal from them to be something that can have a big impact on the board when it hits. And it feels like the format is, many of the cards are kind of fungible. They all kind of hit the board, do a thing, and that's it. But it's not like big sweepers or big bombs or taking over. What do you think about this for like cube?
I'm trying it in my cube right now. It's
okay.
I added it to the cube.
Okay,
I think
cool.
that it's a cool looking card. I don't know if it's going to be good or not.
Osteomancer Adept. This is 1 and a black for a 2/2 Squirrel Warlock at rare. It's got Death Touch, and you can tap it, and it says until end of turn, you may cast creature spells from your graveyard by foraging in addition to paying their other costs. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters with a finality counter on it. That's pretty cool.
Great card. I mean, this is a 2-mana 2/2 Death Touch, so by itself, you're playing a very relevant game piece, and then later in the game, you just tap this and replay something out of your graveyard. Like it's effectively like drawing a card.
That's amazing.
And if you have enough mana, you can just play multiple creatures on the same turn. Once you've tapped this, it just gives that ability to all your creatures. I would give Osteomancer Adept an A-. I'm just going to be thrilled to have this card in my deck. I'd play it in any deck. It's just good regardless, though. Obviously, it's at its best in the Squirrel deck because they enable the foraging better.
Get the foraging and the milling and stuff. Yeah, A- for Osteomancer Adept. That's awesome. Valley Rotcaller, 1 and a black for a 1/3 Squirrel Warlock at rare. It's got Menace. And whenever it attacks, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of other squirrels, bats, lizards, and rats you control.
Yeah, Rotcaller's fantastic. It's
seems very annoying.
1/3 Menace is like pretty hard to block and take down. And early in the game, you're going to attack and ping for 1 or 2 a decent amount. And then late in the game, you might attack when you know it's going to die, and you get to drain them for 4. And that's just all you would need out of the card. I would Really like this card in squirrels or in lizards. Rats, it's a little bit less good, though you still probably play it. And bats definitely likes it because it gains life. So it also enables that theme. So pretty big fan of the Valley Rock color.
How free do you think if you put it into these decks, what is X going to be? Because it's only other ones. It doesn't count itself. But
it counts all four of the black creature types. So it's going to be hard for it not to be picking something up. Like every black creature you cast, except for like some of the rare elementals or uncommon like off-type creatures, will trigger for this. Okay,
so you're going to get one or two out of it almost for free just by building a deck with that color. And if you happen to be built around even more, full squirrels or whatever, then you're going to get a big hit. That seems really good to me. I like B for Valley Rock color.
Yeah, it might even be a B+, honestly.
Yeah, build around and you can up that grade as well. Darkstar Augur is next. It's 2 and a black for a 2/3 Bat Warlock at rare. It's got Offspring for black. Wow. It's got Flying. And it says at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its mana value. Oh, man. Do you want 2 of those?
Oh, yeah. 2 Dark Confidants?
What could go? Yeah, I know. Dude, 2 Dark Confidants. That's scary, man. Seriously, like, are you unabashedly turn 4, just like Darkstar Augur, throw the Offspring on it, let's go? If you have like a normal curve?
Oh, definitely. I mean, turn 4 is not even very much of a question. The question is on turn 7, when you're at 9 life, do you cast both copies? Do you cast just one? Because sometimes what will happen, and you've seen this when you played with any sort of Dark Confidant variant, is you get down to like single digits or like low, maybe 10, 11 life, whatever. Your opponent starts thinking like, maybe this will just kill them. I don't have to attack. But if they aren't attacking, then you're not taking damage from their creatures, and you can sacrifice, you can gain life. There's a lot of ways to end up, mitigating the risk of this card. Okay. Yeah, I'm curious. I would like to look at like an average distribution limited deck, say it has a 6-drop and 2 5s and 3 4s and, just kind of a curve. And how much damage are you taking on average per turn if you have 2 of these out? Usually between like 1 point something life per turn per. I mean, that's just per augur on Dark Confidant per augur. Yeah. So 3-ish per turn if you have 2 of them. I would say less than 3. You're usually not like over 1.5. Okay. Like, because remember, you have all these lands that don't contribute. Totally. I played with this card. It's been excellent. I would give it a B as well. Okay. It's really solid card. Good in any of the decks. And as we look through, there's going to be cards like, wow, this card's great in its type, or these 2 decks and not good in the other 2. This is just good in all the decks. Okay. If you're at 4 life, do you play it at all? Depends on the board, I guess. But they're at 20. Well, they have a flying blocker. Yeah, well. I mean, it's just interesting to note that, this is a rare that there will be some circumstances in which it is actually detrimental for you to put it on the battlefield, which is rare. I mean, normally, if a card's just straight up good, you just play it, anytime you can. Next is Wick the World Mind. What does world mean? Whorls are like the spiral thing on the outside of like the snail's shells, I think is how they're using it here. Okay, cool. That's a neat one. It's 3 and a black for a 2/4 legendary rat warlock. And it is rare. And it says, whenever Wicked or another rat you control enters, create a 1/1 black snail creature token. There you go. If you don't control a snail. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on a snail you control. And then you can pay, is that blue, black, red? Yeah, blue, black, red, and sacrifice the snail. And then Wick deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to each opponent, then draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. This is a cool card, and 4 mana for a 2/4 plus a 1/1 that's going to like grow over time or maybe get refreshed if it dies isn't bad, but the activated ability is hard to pull off. This is really not a 3-color format. Yeah, I mean, are you really going to dig around to try to splash to activate Wick? I feel like probably not. I just don't think you should. So I have been unimpressed with this card. It's also hurt by the fact that the blue-black Rats deck is also not one of the better ones, it seems like. So you're not you don't want this in a non-rats deck. I have tried playing this in like squirrels and it was just
Really?
bad.
You didn't like 4 mana, 2/4 plus a 1/1?
That's just not that good these days. I think that you just don't.
Man,
you're
that
not,
seems fine to me. I mean, I'm not saying it's a B plus or whatever, but if this was
like
common,
a C level card, I think.
yeah, it would be a C or a C. I would probably call it a C plus because remember the snail does have some upside. Like even if you take the activated ability off, it's just whenever another rat enters, it picks up a counter.
Yeah, I mean it's something, but I would not look at this and be like, oh, this is a card to build around. This is a good rare to take first. It's just not those things. It's like a C level card. And I even played against someone who was Grixis and could throw the snail at me and did throw the snail at me, and it was still just like not that impressive. I was like, okay, that's fine.
All right, I'll go C plus on Wick the World Mind. I mean, I still like just the board presence it brings. Next is Coiling Rebirth. This is 3 black for a sorcery at rare. It has gift a card, and it says return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then, if the gift was promised and that creature isn't legendary, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1.
So my favorite combo with this is Wick's Patrol, which is the 4 black 5/3 that mills 3 and gives -X/-X. Because when you Coiling Rebirth 2 of those into play, you get a 5/3, a 1/1, and you kill 2 of their creatures.
And you get to double trouble that? Oh wow, that's nasty.
And that's pretty sick. So the challenge with Coiling Rebirth is, do you have creatures that would be good to copy? Because if not, this is a 5 mana Zombify from your graveyard, and that's just not that impressive of a card. That's like a C- level card.
Yeah,
maybe a D, like a D really.
It's a D, right.
But if you have cards that are good enough that giving them a card is worth making a 1/1, which there are a decent amount of creatures in the set that kind of meet that description, then yeah, Coiling Rebirth gets up to like a C plus.
Okay.
So not an impressive card, but card that has some outs to be cool, which is not bad.
Maha, it's Feathers Knight is next. It's 3 black for a 6/5 legendary elemental bird, and it is mythic rare. It's got flying and trample, and it has ward, discard a card, and it says creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1.
I mean, this card is just obviously good. It's 5 mana, 6/5 flying trample, and they have to discard a card if they want to target it. It also makes it so their creatures are all X1, so
trample
they just die every time they have in combat, and because it has trample, it even gets in more. This is an A. It's a good card in any deck. You can play it. A great card in any deck, really, that you can play it. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with anything else besides just being amazing. So that's this dragon for you.
A for Maha. Next is Season of Loss. This is 3 black for a sorcery at Mythic Rare. It says choose up to 5 paws worth of modes. You may choose the same modes more than once. This one has the same distribution, a 1 paw, a 2 paw, and a 3 paw. 1 paw is each player sacrifices a creature. 2 paws is draw a card for each creature you controlled that died this turn. Okay. And then 3 paws is each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Sweet.
Cards. Incredible. So the best case scenario is you just cast it, choose the last mode, and they die because you have 7 creatures in your graveyard and they're at 7.
And you can count, yeah.
Or you have 5 in your graveyard and you sack 2 and then you have 7 because it goes in that order. But I think that the reason this card is just so incredibly good is that the most common case is you cast it and you make each player sacrifice 3 creatures and then you draw 3 cards because you sack 3 creatures. And then your opponent, obviously
loses their board.
Loses a bunch of creatures themselves.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong card. I would give Season of Loss an A plus. I think.
Yeah, this card just seems. I mean,
what's the fail case here? The fail case is you have no creatures in play and the last mode doesn't do anything. In which case, you can just cast this and make each player sack 5 creatures.
Totally.
It's just Wrath.
It's just Wrath.
So it's Wrath if they're ahead. If you're kind of even or you both have creatures in play, it's like a double or triple Barter in Blood, Innocent Blood, each player sacks a bunch and you draw 2 to 3 cards. And then if you have enough creatures in your graveyard, you can use this as a win condition. So there's not very many situations where this card isn't incredible. That looks like an A plus to me. When you're behind, it's great. When you're ahead, it's great. When you're even, it's great. It's just always great.
Totally. And being great when you're behind is a special premium. That's a difficult.
The biggest thing here is You would like to have creatures in play. I think when you cast this, I think the most powerful mode, again, besides just killing them, the most powerful mode is casting it for 3 sacrifices plus you draw 3. And the thing is that also, if you build a deck to maximize that, you will also pick up the last mode for free because sometimes you'll just have 9 creatures in your graveyard. So I'm looking at this in like a squirrel self-mill deck more than anything else.
And win con in that way. Next is Rottenmouth Viper. It's 5 and a black for a 6/6 elemental snake at Mythic Rare. It says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice any number of non-land permanents. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each permanent sacrificed this way. And it says, whenever Rottenmouth Viper enters or attacks, put a blight counter on it. Then for each blight counter on it, each opponent loses 4 life. 4 life? Wow. Unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card.
So the way, because I've had this card multiple times somehow, the way this plays out is you play it, and then the first time they usually lose 4 life, right? Unless you've gotten them really low. But then if you get to attack with it, which it's a 6/6, you usually will get to attack with it, they then have to do that 2 more times. They can't usually lose 8 more life. So usually what happens at that point is you start chewing away their hand or their board. And I've never had to attack with this a second time. I imagine they just lose if you do that.
For sure.
It also does have the ability to sack permanents to play it, which isn't something you necessarily need to even use to make this be good, but it is a nice bonus. Sometimes you're like, yeah, sure, I'll sack a food to play this a turn early.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty big game,
It is, and it's huge. I mean, it's a freaking 6/6, so, any extra time early getting it down, is going to matter a lot just as far as straight up combat goes. Yeah, that's awesome. Is it just an A?
Just an A for Rottenmouth Viper. You can put it in any deck. Yes, you can maximize it by either being aggressive or having permanents to sacrifice, but my experience with this has just been put it in your deck and cast it.
Okay. That'll move us to red. Our first card is Hired Claw. It's red for a 1/2 lizard mercenary at rare. And it says, whenever you attack with 1 or more lizards, Hired Claw deals 1 damage to target opponent. It's a lizard, so there you go. And you can pay 1 in a red to put a +1/+1 counter on Hired Claw. Activate only if an opponent lost life this turn and only once each turn.
Hired Claw is incredibly good. This is exactly what the red-black deck wants, but it's also good in red-white or red-green because by itself, you just play this. Like imagine this is your opening hand. Turn 1, you play it. Turn 2, you attack. They take 2, and then or they take 1 and then you pump it and then they take 2 more. So they take 3 total on turn 2 and you have a 2/3 in play. So it kind of self-fuels. You don't need other lizards to help. It is obviously better when you have other ones. Mostly it's, are you aggressive? And the answer in this format is yes. So Hired Claw, great card. I would first pick it and hope to go red-black, but be open to being red-white or red-green if that's what was the deck to draft at the time.
How high of a grade does it get?
Honestly, I would give it an A-.
Yeah.
Like, that's what this format is. This is the 1-drop, like one of the scariest in the entire format when you play it on turn 1.
Yeah, we saw last format, best card was a 1-drop, and, that wasn't even as fast of a format. So A- for Hired Claw. Next is Artist Talent. This is 1 in a red for an enchantment class at rare. And it says, the base level is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. That doesn't seem that great. And then level 2 is 2 in a red. Non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And then level 3 is also 2 in a red. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead.
This is an F. You cannot spend
no way.
5-8 mana to just not do anything. So do not put Artist Talent in your deck. In your deck. I'm sorry.
Emberheart Challenger is next. It's 1 in a red for a 2/2 Mouse Warrior at rare. It's got haste and prowess, and it has Valiant. Whenever Emberheart Challenger becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card.
This card's awesome.
That's sweet.
It's at its best in red-white, as no surprise there. But you could play this in any of the red combinations and be very happy with the results because it's a 2/2 haste prowess for 2 is already pretty good.
Yeah.
And then whenever you target it, you get to looks at additional cards. Like it's easy to have that work even outside of a strictly Valiant deck. So I would give Emberheart Challenger a B plus. I think it's like a touch worse than Hired Claw, but it's about the same. They're both really, really good.
Really, really good. B plus for Emberheart Challenger. Next is Manifold Mouse. This is 1 and a red for a 1/2 Mouse Soldier at rare. It's got Offspring 2. And it says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target mouse you control gains your choice of double strike or trample until end of turn. Jeez. And if you have both, you can do one of each. Thank you very much. One of the most potent combos in combat is double strike and trample.
I mean, this card is just unbelievable.
That's busted.
I think red-white is one of the best combinations, or one of the better ones at least, and this is one of the best cards for that deck. Like if I opened this, I would really want to be red-white. Manifold Mouse, just a flat A. Like you just, this card is good early or late. It can target itself. It can target your other stuff. Like it is just a messed up card.
Yeah. So A for Manifold Mouse, kill it and its friend. Next is Byway Barterer. This is 2 and a red for a 3/3 Raccoon Rogue at rare. It's got Menace. And it says, whenever you expend 4, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 2 cards. So base level, pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, 3/3 Menace is already good. And the way the ability works is you won't use it maybe the first time or 2 times that you have the option, like depending on when the game that is, right? You don't want to discard 4 cards to draw 2. But once you have like, you're kind of empty-handed and you can get into that cycle, you expend 4, you discard nothing, you draw 2 cards. Next turn, you can probably do it again. And if they don't kill it, like you're just seeing 3 cards a turn, and they're going to lose really fast as a result.
Yeah. And the baseline's really strong too. What do you like? B plus for Byway Barter?
I would give B plus for Byway Barter.
Yeah.
I have just been impressed by it overall.
Next is Hearthborn Battler. It's 2 and a red for a 2/3 Lizard Warlock at rare. It has haste, and whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, this thing does 2 damage to target opponent. Wow.
It's pretty solid. It annoys them because it triggers off them too, so they have to like either slow down their spell count or just get punished for it. And of course, if you can double spell, you can deal some nice damage. Casting this on 4 mana and then playing a 1-drop, it does trigger it. So yeah, I like the Battler. I think it's like probably like a C plus B minus level card overall.
Yeah, I'd go B minus on the Battler. And by the way, just in the few red cards we've seen here, I mean, you can get the picture, right? Like the one card they cared about, whatever prowessy things is like trash. And then it was Emberheart Challenger, Manifold Mouse, Byway Barterer, Hearthborn Battler, and Hired Claw. They're all just like absurd attacking creatures that get your opponent's life total down very quickly. So it's not hard to figure out what's going on in the format, at least as far as the high level color stuff goes. Next is Valley Flamecaller. Let me guess, it does damage. It's 2 and a red for a 3/3 Lizard Warlock at rare. If a lizard, mouse, otter, or raccoon you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1 instead. Why doesn't it have Menace? Why doesn't it have haste? Right? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of does because you play this in attack with 2 creatures. They're probably, getting a nice little bonus. So yeah, it effectively does do something as soon as it hits the board. I mean, the Flamecaller is good. It's not a bomb. This is like kind of like Earthborn Battler. It's maybe a little better than that. So probably like a B.
Yeah,
B
plus range for Valley Flamecaller. But man, everything's pointing in the same direction here for red. Next is Storm Splitter. This is 3 and a red for a 1/4 Otter Wizard at Mythic Rare. It has haste, but it says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a token that's a copy of Storm Splitter. Exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. I mean, that's kind of sweet.
The way you do this is you, at the end of their turn, cast your first spell, your most expensive, hopefully. You get a copy. You don't have to lose it. You untap. Now you cast a spell. Now you have 4 of them. And then you cast another spell. You have 8. And boom, especially if one of the spells is like all your creatures get +2/+0. Okay. The reality of the situation is you should not select this card. You should not draft the deck it would be good in. You should not put the card in your deck, and you should move on. So, yes, it's a build around like, guess a build around B is kind of what I would give this if I was reading it having not played. But at this point, it's I think, pretty clear to me that it's just, you really shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. It's a shame.
We kind of lost you when I said whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you're like, yeah, no, we're not. That's not the game.
It's just, look, the reality is, I mean, that's how this format is starting to shake out, and we'll see where that ends up. But I think it's pretty easy to diagnose when the 1s and 2s are really pushed, as we've seen before. Removal spells get worse, so spell-based decks, like, you just can't keep up with Hired Claws and the Hearthfire Champions and all the 1-mana creatures or Offspring creatures that are putting 2 things on the board when you're trying to cast removal spells. 3-mana killer creatures just not that good when this is the sort of thing that's going on. And Storm Splitter is a card that takes some setup. It doesn't do, you spend 4 mana for a 1/4 haste. It doesn't do anything. Next turn, maybe you do something. But honestly, if you don't get to that 3rd spell, this also doesn't even do that much.
It's not like you're winning the game if you get 3 extra copies of this for a turn.
How much better would this be if it was when you cast an instant or sorcery spell, deal 2 damage to your opponent? Yeah, or deal 1 damage to any target. Like, those would both be a lot better.
So much better. Yeah, because you need to properly go off to make Storm Splitter like amazing. There's a chance that you have a whole army of these things and the game still doesn't end, and you were done. Sunspine Lynx is next. It's 2 red for a 5/4 elemental cat at rare. It says players can't gain life and damage can't be prevented. And when Sunspine Lynx enters, it deals damage to each player equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. Well, maybe just 4 mana 5/4 is kind of the name of the game here.
Yeah, I mean, that is what's going on. I think this card is okay. Its abilities don't do anything. Sometimes it pings them for 1. Sometimes it pings you for 1. I mean, there are some, and damage can't be prevented is really just fake text for limited. There's I don't even know if there's a single card in the set that would impact.
Hexproof still works, so
and it would stop protection, but there's not even like that much of that I don't think. Doesn't do anything about indestructible, for example. And then players can't gain life. Yeah, that is real. I've had a food and play against this card, but you just wait till this goes away and then you do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, as funny as this sounds, I don't even know if this is really like a B. I kind of think it's like a C+.
Yeah.
There is a big cost for being off type, and this doesn't fit super well into a lot of these decks. Plus, there's another thing going on, which is this format has a lot of really good 4-drops. Like, even just in red, like we're talking about the Pathmaker, like the 4/2 Otter. At uncommon, you have the 3/4 Menace that hits them for 2. Like, there's the 4 mana 3/3 Menace Reach that has Bloodthirst +1/+1. Like, when you have that many options, each one becomes less important to get. And I think Sunspine Lynx is going to be worse than most of the creatures that cost like 2 or 1 mana or a cheap removal spell.
Yeah, what if I told you, hey, this is a common, it's called Sunspine Lynx, it's 2 red for a 5/4. What grade would you give that? It's like a C+ or something, right?
I mean, that's what this is, right?
Yeah.
So, C+. Yeah.
Next is Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest. It's 3 red for a 5/5 legendary bird dragon at Mythic Rare. It does have flying. And it says, whenever Dragonhawk enters or attacks, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 4 or greater. You may play those cards until your next end step. At the beginning of your next end step, Dragonhawk deals 2 damage to each opponent for each of those cards that are still exiled. Dang. That's a beating.
Yeah. I mean, now we're talking. Like, I think obviously, like, this, as off type as this might be, 5 mana 5/5 flying with a card draw mode that also deals damage. Yes, this card is good. Note that when it exiles, you can only play it this turn. So the turn you cast this, you're almost never gonna play the card you exile. But that does mean they take 2 damage for them.
Okay, so it says until your next end step. What is that?
That means when you cast it, you have it to play this turn.
Okay. But you're getting the 2 damage then.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, fantastic. Just a straight up A+.
I would just give Dragonhawk an A, yeah.
Yeah, just an A. Festival of Embers is 4 and a red for an enchantment at rare. During your turn, you may cast instant or sorcery spells from your graveyard by paying 1 life in addition to their other costs. If a card or token would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. And then you can pay 1 and a red to sacrifice it. Yeah, I mean, this looks just like the same stuff that we've been talking about. I mean, you pay 5 mana, nothing happens. It has a pretty extreme setup cost, and according to your early reports, it's in a deck that you don't want to be in anyway.
And you have to pay a life. You still have to pay the mana, but you also have to pay a life.
Whatever. Yeah, F for Festival of Embers.
Again, this is your classic, like, build around C. I could see how this could be good in the exact right circumstance, but no, you really don't want to play this card. It's an F for Festival of Embers, unfortunately.
Season of the Bold is next. It's 3 red for a sorcery at Mythic Rare. Says choose up to 5 paws worth of modes, and this has the same setup as the others. So 1 paw is create a tapped treasure token. 2 paws is exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play them. And then 3 paws is until the end of your next turn, whenever you cast a spell, Season of the Bold deals 2 damage to up to 1 target creature.
So this one does not do that much right away. Like, almost all the modes actually don't do a whole lot
to the board. Yeah.
What I think you really would like to get the 3rd mode, because that's the one that starts like really popping off. So what you want to do, I think, a lot of times is either cast this for 2 treasures plus until the end of your next turn, all your spells get shock in addition to whatever they do. Mm-hmm. So you go, like, let's say turn 5, you just cast this, you do nothing, you take another hit. Next turn, you can maybe play 3 spells, kill two or 3 of their creatures.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah.
And then if you have a lot of mana, you can exile the top 2 cards, and that can help with the 3rd mode. My guess is it's either 2 treasures or exile the top 2 cards plus the last mode a lot of the time. If you're really digging, you could cast like 2, exile your top 4 and make a treasure, or you can make a couple treasures in exile. I don't think you're going to make 5 treasures all that often either. So it's an okay card. I think Season of the Bold is like a B, where if you get some breathing room, which there's not a lot to be had in this format, it can be pretty powerful. But if you can cast this and survive until your next turn, I feel like you're going to be in a good shape most of those games.
And you get to plan this out like pretty well, right? If you go for the 3rd mode plus the 2 treasures, like, you know what you have in your hand plus a draw step to make it work. Like, hey, if I have 5 mana, I get 2 extra treasures. I'm going to be able to cast 3 spells next turn. Like, you should, have a really good idea of whether you're going to be able to do that or not. Sweet card.
I mean, the other thing is, there will be sometimes on turn 6, you go cast this, make 2 treasures and choose the last mode, then cast a 1 mana spell to kill your thing immediately, so you can get like a little bit of on the board presence right away by doing that.
That'll move us to green. Red was pretty self-explanatory with what it was trying to do. Green, the first green card is called For the Common Good. It is green XX for a sorcery at Rare. It says create X tokens that are copies of target token you control. Then tokens you control gain indestructible until your next turn. You gain 1 life for each token you control.
This card is pretty cool. It's not Pest Infestation.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a token to copy. Like, that's a requirement here. And you want it to be a token creature, like, ideally, right? I mean, I guess you can make a bunch of food or something, but like, man, the setup cost on this feels very, very high. Like, there's just going to be some games where you don't have anything relevant to copy, right? Like, even if you get 5 mana.
But
and also they can kill it in response.
If you always had something to copy, 5 mana for 2 copies of the token is just like, that's just not crazy good or anything.
No. And what's the indestructible part? Like, most tokens are small, so that's like whatever. It's a sorcery. Yeah, I don't like For the Common Good. I would say the setup cost is too high on this, and I'd give it a D- probably. I don't see a deck where I'm super excited to play it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is probably close to an F. I just don't think you're really gonna it's really gonna work out the way you want.
Mistbreath Elder is next. It's green for a 2/2 Frog Warrior at Rare. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, return another creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Mistbreath Elder. Otherwise, you may return Mistbreath Elder to its owner's hand.
So if you're the frog deck, this is pretty sweet. 1 mana 2/2 is pretty nice. That can let you flicker your frogs, and it's also 1 mana 2/2. You could just not choose to return anything.
Yeah, there's no downside here, right? You can just do nothing and just have a 1 mana 2/2 frog.
I mean, I would play this in any deck that is
Yeah.
just trying to get on the board, and also decks with ETBs, which is pretty much all the decks. So
Right, definitely the frog deck.
I like B for Mistbreath Elder. It's
Same.
a pretty cool little card.
Very cool card. And, there's no shame in playing it on turn one and trading it off. Like that is a thing that will happen sometimes. Paw Patch Recruit is next. It is green for a Rabbit Warrior at rare. It's a 2/1, and it has Offspring 2. It has Trample. And it says, whenever a creature you control becomes a target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control other than that creature. Nice.
Yeah.
That's really good.
This card's really good. I mean, a 1-mana 2/1 Trample is kind of nice for a Rabbit deck anyway. It has Offspring 2, so you get like 2 little dudes. And then if anything gets targeted, they both trigger and then give something else a bonus. So it's really annoying. When your opponent plays this with Offspring, it's like, okay, I'll kill the 2/1 and then the other one, and then they probably put 2 +1/+1 counters on like different things and then kill the 1/1. So that's like they 2-for-1'd you and got 3 +1/+1 counters out of the deal.
Totally.
Or you try to kill it in combat, which, that can definitely happen too.
Yeah, there's going to be matchups, black, red, or whatever, where this card's going to super shine. And then I think it's just going to be good in all the others.
I mean, 1-mana 2/1 Trample with Offspring 2 is the Rabbit deck would never cut that.
Right,
So,
exactly.
that's
baseline is high and ceiling's even higher. B+ for Paw Patch Recruit? B?
Might go A-, honestly. It's really strong.
Okay, B+ to A- for Paw Patch Recruit. Next is Valley Might Caller. This is green for a 1/1 Frog Warrior at rare. It's got Trample. And it says, whenever another frog, rabbit, raccoon, or squirrel you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on Valley Might Caller. So does this happen naturally enough that I don't need to build towards it, that it's just going to be good if I play it on turn one? Because there's 2 scenarios that you have to think about with cards like this. The one where you have it on turn one, and then what happens from there, especially if you haven't fully built around it. And then the scenario where you draw it late in the game, where you've already kind of curved out and you may not get any counters on the dang thing, full stop. So my thinking is it may be worth it to put it in my deck, because when I do draw it early, it can become a 3/3 or a 4/4 trample just by me playing my natural spells. And that's worth it, even for the downside of the late game. But if it's not happening naturally, if you're talking about bad top deck late game and I have to build around it specifically, then I'm much less interested.
Yeah, I don't think you have to build around it. Pretty much every deck is just it's gonna work in. And if you want to know why removal is bad, look at our first 4 green cards. 3 of them are just good 1-drops.
Totally.
It's that are like B, A-, and I think Valley Might Color is also like an A-. It's quite strong.
Oh, really?
So,
if you turn one, it's that good, huh?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would go like B on the Might Caller just because of the top deck downside, which is very real. But I mean, sounds like the upside of turn one playing this is just absurd. Like if you're going that high. So yeah, crazy. So another, like you said, great 1-drop. And Paw Patch Recruit also has Offspring. So removal's just like plummeting in value. Next is Innkeeper's Talent. This is 1 and a green for a rare class enchantment. Base level, it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Okay, yeah. Well, I'm just kind of like, you could read the rest, but like I'm in for that straight up. Level 2, wow, it's even cheap. It's just green. And it says permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1. Good Lord. And then level 3 is 3 and a green. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. Holy smokes. Man, That's a magic card right there.
It sure is.
I think that's got to be one of the toughest things to see on turn 2. Because remember, one of the things that's sort of inherent to these types of cards is that generally speaking, enchantments are the hardest of the permanents that you see on the battlefield regularly to get rid of. You can't attack them like planeswalkers. And for whatever reason, artifacts catch a little flack on some red common, usually in this set as well, where they just get nabbed by a damage plus shatter type thing. But, enchantments are the most annoying type of card type to get rid of. And this one's just amazing. Yeah.
Long term, this card will easily win you the game if it just sits in play.
Right.
And short term, it gives you +1/+1 of stats every single turn.
Yeah.
So Innkeeper's Talent is an A, bordering on A plus, to be honest, because of how hard it is to get rid of. Like, when you cast this card, you're just going to win as long as the game lasts pretty much any amount of time.
Totally. And, we talk about setup cost a lot. The setup cost is you need creatures. Like, that's going to be natural, especially in a green deck, a limited deck, etc. So it's basically 0 for that too. So A for Innkeeper's Talent, trending towards A+. Next is Keen-Eyed Curator. This is green for a 3/3 Raccoon Scout at Rare. It says as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards exiled with Keen-Eyed Curator, it gets +4/+4 and has trample. And you can pay 1 and exile target card from a graveyard. Dude, that is nice.
Yeah, this is like a pretty buffed Scavenging Ooze where it's like, this is 2 mana for a 3/3, though it does cost green. Mm-hmm. And then you end up in a spot where you're able to just quickly make it into an extremely large creature.
That is, How often, like, do you think that finding the 4th card type is a challenge, like in regular limited? Like where we don't necessarily like mill a land or have fetch lands or stuff like that very often?
There's enough self-mill in various decks, especially in green. Creature, instant, and sorcery are all kind of gimmies, and all you just need is like a land or an enchantment or artifact to go to the graveyard, and that hasn't seemed to be challenging. I've seen this in play twice, and both times it was just immediately a 7/7.
Okay, that's amazing. So do you want to go B+ for Keen-Eyed Curator? Is it better than that?
I think I would give it a B+, yeah. Okay. It's not quite A level, but I think it is very good.
Seems awesome. Next is Tender Wild Guide. This is 1 and a green for a 2/2 Possum Druid. It's rare. It has Offspring 2, and it has 2 activated abilities. You can tap it to add a mana of any color, or you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Dang, that's awesome.
Yeah. Man. I mean, this card is incredible. It's a 2 mana 2/2 that taps for any color would just be a good card. It also taps to put a counter on itself. It also has Offspring, and these cards really they stack up fast.
Yeah, these cards are a problem. Like, they sit there at 2/2, and your opponent has a 2/2, and they want to attack you, and they can't because you can just put a counter on it. Then you put a counter on it anyway, and next thing you know, you've got 4/4s and 5/5s on the other side of the battlefield that aren't getting smaller, and once they're big enough to start attacking, they crush you. And this is off of their 2-drop. Like, are you? That also, by the way, powered out a 4 and a 5 mana. Like, this is just crazy. It's weird to look back at the blue the blue rares that we started with and just see how horrendously bad they are compared to these like immediate board affecting, attacking, good early, good late, good card economy. Like these cards from all these other colors have just been absurd. I love Tender Wild Guide. I mean, again, it's just a decision between B+ and A- for me. I would say A- for Tender Wild Guide. I mean, this is the type of card that's good early, good late, flexible, puts out 2 bodies. There's just nothing to complain about here.
Yeah, I think you could just give it an A.
Just a straight up A? Sure.
I think that would
green
be fine.
Is crushing it. Thornvault Forager is next. It's 1 and a green for a 2/2 Squirrel Ranger at Rare. It taps to add green, so similar to the Wild Guide. It also you can tap it and forage to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. And remember, foraging is exile 3 cards from your yard or sacrifice food. And then it has yet another activated ability. You can pay 3 and a green and tap it to search your library for a squirrel card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. That's awesome still. I mean, it's not as good as Tender Wild Guide, I don't think, but like, it has a similar play pattern where you play it on 2, it turbos out your stuff, and then it is relevant late game.
Yeah.
It's expensive, but...
It's a mana dork that also just is a card draw engine, and it can be a double mana dork if you have like some good cash grab setup. So I would give A- for Thornvault Forager.
Wow.
And it's obviously at its best in a squirrel deck because you want the last ability to do something. But if you play this in Green-White Rabbits that has 3 squirrels total in the deck, it's still going to be good. So
we did not like For the Common Good, but then we went basically B, A range, A range, A range, B range, A range, A range so far.
Oh, well, green still has 3 really good cards left.
A couple of cards left for me here.
And one that's also good. So next up is Scrap Shooter. It's 1 green for a Raccoon Archer, so it's on type at Rare. It's a 4/4 reach, and you can gift them a card. If you do, when it enters, it destroys an artifact or enchantment. So
Jeez.
it's a 3-mana 4/4 Reclamation Sage, but you have to give them a card if you want to blow something up. Still, it's totally fine as just 3-mana 4/4 reach, and I would just give this a B+ based on how big it is.
Same.
And when you have to blow something up, you have to blow up an Innkeeper's Talent. Yeah, give them a card. Way better for you.
Yeah, enjoy your half a land, and I'll take out your bomb.
But that brings us to what might be the best card in the set. I mean, in terms of right now, it's got on 17 lands a 68% game in hand win rate, which is just like unbelievable. It's Fecund Greenshell. Fecund Greenshell. It's 3 green for a 4/6 elemental turtle at just rare. It has reach. As long as you control 10 or more lands, creatures you control get +2/+2. And whenever this or another creature you control with toughness greater than its power enters, look at your top card, either draw it, or if it's a land, put it into play.
Put on the battlefield tapped.
Yep.
Wow. And it's a 4/6 with reach for 5 mana. So it's this huge
that draws
brick
a card.
wall that you can't get through.
And if the card you draw is a land, it goes directly into play. And then once you get to 10 lands, you win the game.
You win the game. Incredible.
It also triggers off of 2 4s or 2 3s or 1 2s that you play. So if you see this card, you should take it and put it in your deck. And you should try to pick up some other creatures that trigger it, though you don't really need to go too deep on that. Honestly, just casting this by itself is pretty good. I mean, 5-mana 4/6 draw card is just a big game,
Yeah. Would you just say straight up A? Is it an A+?
You could just say A+ on this one, yeah.
I think so too. I like to give that to things that stabilize boards, and a 4/6 reach does that. I can't believe that's a regular rare.
The next one is very similar. It's Lumra Bellow of the Woods. It's 4 green for a legendary elemental bear, mythic rare, so it's off-typed again. It has vigilance and reach. It's as big as the number of lands you control. And when it enters, you mill 4 cards and then return all your lands from your graveyard tapped. So
what?
If you cast this doing no other work, if on turn 6 you cast this, it's going to mill 4 and hit, probably 1 or 2 lands most of the time, sometimes 3, sometimes 0, rarely 4, which means it's going to come in as like a 7/7 or an 8/8 that put 2 lands into play and filled your graveyard for other things. And then it grows as time goes on.
That is incredible. Also,
Fantastic
vigilance
card.
reach on huge stats is a very, very annoying card to deal with. Like you're under pressure, but you can't race. You can't crack back unless you can kill it.
So A for Lumra. At its best in the Squirrel deck, because that deck's doing some self-mill already, but honestly, just cast the card. You don't need to do much more than just that.
Tell me Season of Gathering doesn't do anything to affect the board and is kind of a miss.
No, it's not. It's a 4 green. It's for a season. You get 5 paws. The first mode for 1 paw is put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and it gets vigilance and trample until end of turn. So already you can just give 5 counters and vigilance and trample overall if you just want to do that.
And
you can stack
out.
the same counter on the same creature if you want,
Okay.
And then for 2 paws, you can destroy all artifacts or enchantments. So you get to choose artifact or enchantment, destroy all of them of that type. And then for 3 paws, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control.
That is absolutely absurd.
So
how often do you think it's just single paw, I win the game, and the other modes were cool, but it's GG?
I think the 2 most common modes are going to be either 5 paws of the on just +1/+1 counter, just straight up big overrun sort of effect.
Yeah.
Or use two paws on that plus draw like 4 or 5 cards.
Totally.
Maybe more if you have a big creature. Obviously, if you have to destroy all enchantments, or artifacts, you can, but I think most of the time you're going to be either finishing the game with an overrun, and if you can't kill them, you'll probably just draw like 5 cards and attack them with a 6/6 or 5/5 for 1 turn or whatever.
So green got hooked up. So that there's another A for Season of Gathering, right?
Yeah, I mean, green has 12 cards here, and one of them's a miss, and then every single other one is a B or an A.
Yeah.
That's not even an exaggeration. That's just straight up what it is. More A's than B's. And the B's are closer to A's also. So
yeah, they're all trending that direction. Okay. So green's really good. That means white is our last single color. First card is Dawn's Truce. It's 1 and a white for an instant at rare. It has gift a card. It says you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. If the gift was promised, permanents you control also gain indestructible until end of turn.
I mean, this is I think very clearly for like a commander, and I could see it having utility there because it's got this big sweeping effect. But I think it's an F for our purposes.
Okay.
At the very least, a D.
D or an F for Dawn's Truce. Next is Essence Channeler. This is 1 and a white for a Bat Cleric. It's a 2/1 at rare. It says, as long as you've lost life this turn, Essence Channeler has flying and vigilance. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever it dies, put its counters on target creature you control. That's cool.
Yeah. It's pretty good. I mean, in the Bat deck, you whenever you gain life, put a counter on. This is already very good, and then it has modular. Basically, you get to move the counters to one of your creatures. So I'm pretty happy with Essence Channeler. It's obviously the best in the Bat deck, but you can put this in like a Rabbit deck or a red-white, mouse deck and still be totally happy with it. So you don't want to put it in a Birds deck because you don't want to draft the Birds deck. So this might look like it'd be good there, but I would give Essence Channeler a B.
Okay. Yeah, B for Essence Channeler, a slight build around there. Next is Valley Quest Caller. 1 and a white for a 2/3 Rabbit Warrior at rare. Whenever one or more other rabbits, bats, birds, and or mice you control enter, scry 1, and other rabbits, bats, birds, and mice you control get +1/+1.
I mean, this is just the perfect card for the Rabbit deck or the Mouse deck, and obviously, you'd play it in any of the white decks, but really, if I first pick a Valley Quest Caller, which I hope to do, this is one of the better cards in the set for sure. Mm-hmm. It's just a really good build around or enabler even, because like just being in those colors will naturally do it for the two of the best decks, maybe the two best decks, red, white, and green, white. So I would give Valley Quest Caller an A, which part of that rating takes into the fact that these decks are good. This is kind of like when we looked at some of the blue cards, they got a penalty. Valley Quest Caller gets a bonus because just based on text, this is probably like an A-, but I think it's A, maybe even A+
if you build
in this
around.
Format.
Yeah,
so,
and in this format.
Well, not even if you build around, just if you draft it,
I see.
the decks it goes in like always do the thing. So
because
I would give Valley
metagame.
Quest Caller an A, and I'd be really happy to first pick it.
Okay. Caretaker's Talent is next. It's 2 and a white for a class. It's rare. It says whenever one or more tokens you control enter, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Okay. Level 2 only cost white, and it says when this class becomes level 2, create a token that's a copy of target token you control. Okay, so once again, we're kind of all in on tokens. And then level 3 is 3 and a white. Creature tokens you control get +2/+2. All right, so the question is there enough token generation to support a card like Caretaker's Talent?
In green-white, absolutely. I almost view this as a green-white gold card. And I would say it's like a builder on A, because if you combine this with a bunch of like carrot cakes and like the 3/2 Homesteader that makes 2/1/1s, this card is just going to be awesome. Like you're going to draw a card every turn, and then you're going to make a token and draw a card off that. And then all your tokens are getting +2/+2 is incredible. So you're kind of getting the cards back pretty fast. And then level 2 and 3 get you a lot of stats on board. So build around A for Caretaker's Talent, but you obviously have to have the right deck. And I could see playing this in red-white. I don't think you're going to play it in black-white or blue-white very often.
Okay, but in green-white, it's like Supremo.
Yeah, great.
Grade? Build around?
Build around A.
A, but you have to build around it. Next is Jackdaw Savior. This is 2 and a white for a 3/1 flying bird cleric at rare. It says whenever Jackdaw Savior or another creature you control with flying dies, return another target creature card with lesser mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield. Sometimes these cards can work, but you really do need like a critical mass of 1s and 2s to make these type of things go. I know it can be more than that too, but I don't know. How much more do we need beyond 2 and a white for a 3/1 flying bird? That's already
also when this dies,
fine, right?
Gets back a small creature,
a 2-drop or whatever. Yeah. So it's just
Yeah. This is a B.
B
like
for
this
Jackdaw
is one where
Savior.
even though the Birds deck I don't think comes together very often, you can just put this in any of the decks and you will be pretty happy with it. Like a very common play pattern with this card is you trade off 2-drops and then you cast this, and then what are they going to do? Like they can't really ignore a 3/1 flyer. It's a good blocker, and you'll get something back and maybe they'll exile, but you didn't invest much in this. You just played a 3/1 flyer for 3.
So B for Jackdaw Savior, very nice card. Next is Beza the Bounding Spring. This is 2 white for a 4/5 legendary elemental elk at Mythic Rare. It says when Beza enters, create a treasure token. If an opponent controls more lands than you, you gain 4 life. If an opponent has more life than you, create 2 1/1 blue fish creature tokens. That if an opponent controls more creatures than you, draw a card if an opponent has more cards in hand than you. Huh.
This
just a bunch of free stuff on a 4/5 for 4. Yeah.
I mean, look at all the modes. If you got any one of those modes and you cast this, you'd feel like you got a pretty good deal. 4 mana, 4/5, draw a card. Great. Always playing that card. 4 mana, 4/5, ETB, gain 4 life. Well, when you're losing, that sounds like a pretty great way to not die. 4 mana, 4/5, put 2 1/1s into play. Happy with that. 4 mana, 4/5, make a treasure is probably the worst of the 1 mode times. But remember, you get multiple modes. It's not hard. I had a game where I was losing really badly, and I drew this and got all the modes except the extra card. So I played this, gained 4, got a treasure, made 2 1/1s, and it just felt incredible. I did end up losing the game 10 turns later, but I was going to lose it 1 turn later if I didn't draw this card. And it really was as good as it looks. So I would give Beza probably an A+, maybe just an A. It's pretty close on to A+ in my opinion, because when you're losing, this is just the best card ever, but it's not like you have to be losing for it to be good. Imagine a game where you curve out and you just play this on 4, you'll just draw a card. They'll have more cards in hand and you're way ahead on board. Like, that's a fantastic card.
Okay. Well, we love cards that help you out when you're behind, and that seems to be the exact designation of Beza. And then if you're ahead on all the other metrics, a 4/5 for 4 mana is probably going to finish the game for you anyway.
Yeah, if you're ahead on every metric and then you cast a 4/5, yeah, you're probably doing fine
just
too.
Win anyway. So yeah, A+ ish for Beza the Bounding Spring. Next.
It's an A+ when it comes to what card will save me in this position. Beza's a pretty good answer.
No, you're right. And that is where the A+s come in. So A+ for Beza the Bounding Spring. Next is Salvation Swan. This is 3 and a white for a 3/3 flash flying bird cleric at Rare. It says whenever Salvation Swan or another bird you control enters, exile up to 1 target creature you control without flying. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. I actually had a chance to play with this card 2 times already, even though I've only done like 4 drafts. So I don't know how I ended up with 2 of these, but it was good. Flash flying 3/3 for 4 mana is already a sell. That's one that you can use to flash in and block stuff. But you find that as the game plays out, all of a sudden you've just got extra creatures with flying as well.
And you're starting at such a high place that you don't need to get value out of the trigger for it to be good, but obviously it's really easy also to get value from the trigger. So I like B+ for Salvation Swan. I think it's Definitely. A very solid card.
That's how it played out for me. Next is Warren Warleader. This is 2 white for a 4/4 Mythic Rare Rabbit Knight with Offspring 2. And whenever you attack, choose 1. You can create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token that's tapped and attacking. Or you can have attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn.
This card's neat because it's unbeatable whether it attacks or not.
I was going to say, is it? I was like, this is just like ridiculous.
How do you beat Warren Warleader? Oh, that's the neat part. You don't. It's just a busted card. Like, if you curve out and cast this on 4 mana and attack with 2 creatures even, like, it's just going to put them in a very difficult position. Late game, you cast this for 6 mana, you get 2 triggers, you just win the game. Middle of the game, nothing in play, you cast this for 6 mana. Even if they kill the 4/4, your 1/1 can then make another 1/1 when it attacks. Like, obviously you want to be in rabbits, but you'd put this into any deck, and I would give an A+ to Warren Warleader. I think the card is just absolutely bonkers.
You said it, it's just busted. Next is Whiskervale Forerunner. This is 3 and a white for a 3/4 Mouse Bard at Rare. It's got Valiant, so whenever it gets targeted for the first time, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them. You may put it onto the battlefield if it's your turn. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Now, that's an awesome Valiant payoff. I mean, even then you don't really need to build around it much, right? Just have a few things that target your own stuff and off you go.
Yeah, I mean, the main build around part is making sure you have enough cheap creatures, but in this format, that's pretty trivial. It's not usually difficult to find ways to target your own stuff like that. That
Right.
comes pretty naturally as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, once you have this, you're going to prioritize. Make sure you get a longbow, or like the duo for 1 mana that taps to give +1/+1 or what have you. But I would say it's a B. Whisker Veil Forerunner is very solid card in the Valiant decks. It's a little expensive. There's tons of 4s, so keep that in mind. But it is a pretty good card to grind them out with.
Yeah. Next is the season for white, so it's Season of the Burrow, and this is 3 white for same thing, mythic rare sorcery, 5 paws. 1 paw gets you a 1/1 rabbit token. 2 paws says exile target non-land permanent, its controller draws a card. And 3 paws says return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it.
So 5 mana make 5 rabbits is going to be a game winner in the
That's kind
rabbits
of good,
deck.
yeah.
That's already good. Turning their permanents into cards with the second mode is okay. Like, make 3 1/1s, exile your 5/5, you draw a card is still a pretty good deal. And then if you have a good permanent to return, I had a black-white deck that returned the Daggerfang duo, so the 3/2 Death Touch. Now you have a 3/2 Death Touch Indestructible is like a pretty good one. But most of the time, instead of the third mode, you'd rather just get 3 1/1s. So that's going to be the most common mode. I think the 2 most common modes are 5 1/1s or 3 1/1s plus exile a permanent. Sometimes you'll do 2 1/1s plus get something back if you have something really good to get back. Mm-hmm. And like all the seasons, it's like powerful and flexible. A lot of different ways to play this. If you're really far behind, exile there are 2 creatures and make a 1/1, and you'll still feel pretty good about that. So I like Season of the Burrow probably at like A-. It's maybe just flat A, honestly. It's just really good. There's not that many situations where this won't be a very strong card.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, the first mode, just making 5 rabbits is already just, that's going to be a B or a B plus, probably straight up. Last white card is called Starfall Invocation. It's 3 white for a sorcery at rare. It says, destroy all creatures, and it has gift a card. If the card was promised, return a creature card, put into your graveyard this way, excuse me, to the battlefield under your control.
So it can only bring back stuff that it destroys. So like you can't just get back your best creature if it died earlier. But Wrath that lets you trade a card for having your creature in play right away is pretty nice. It makes up for one of the drawbacks that Wraths tend to have, which is they get to be the first to refill the board. Imagine if you got a 4 mana card back, you would feel pretty good. Mm-hmm. I just don't think the white decks really want to be built in a ways to maximize Wrath. Like, I would put this in basically any white deck because you just have games where you're on the draw and they start ahead and you can be like, okay, I'm gonna slow play this. I'm gonna play like one thing out to make it not too obvious. But honestly, if pick one, pack one, I'm looking at like Starfall Invocation versus a good rabbit common. I think you probably want to take the good common,
Yeah, I mean, that does matter, right? Like when Wraths are really good, but they're in formats where the color, they're almost always white, and white is almost always creature-based on-board type thing, especially if it's really creature-based, really, aggressive or whatever, then the Wraths do go down a little bit, unless there's an archetype that's good that can support it. And I don't know if that's the case here. Okay, gold cards. First one is called... Oh, go ahead. Oh, yeah.
I said, let's do it.
Let's do it. So first one is called Castrol the Windcrested. It's 3 blue-white for a 4/5 legendary bird scout at rare. It's got flying. It says, whenever one or more birds you control deal combat damage to a player, choose one. You may put a bird creature card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. You can put a +1/+1 counter on each bird you control, or you can draw a card.
So Castrol mostly suffers from being in a bad color pair. And this is one of the few cards that would make me want to draft the bird deck, because this card is just absurd. If you cast this on turn 5 in the blue-white deck, you almost always will have a bird in play and they can't block it. That's just not that hard to do. It's almost any creature, because there's just not that many flyers, that you're routinely playing against, because birds and bats, the 2 flying tribes, are, I think, not the best. So you cast this, you attack, and then you just immediately draw a card or get a bird back from your graveyard or put a big bird into play from your hand. or you get a +1/+1 counter on all your birds. Like either way, it doesn't matter which mode you choose. You're going to be really happy with the result. Like when we look at these modes, the baseline, you're like, well, how do these compare to draw a card? Well, draw a card's on it, so it compares very favorably right there. And if you can't get more than a card's worth of value from one of the other modes, just draw a card. You're happy. Right. You're happy there too. That being said, this gets a pretty significant penalty, which is pick one, pack one. You don't really want to start by drafting birds. And
this isn't good enough to flip that in.
No, I mean, in a vacuum, let's say we didn't know anything about how the set played out besides the fact that there were all these supported creature types and they were all equal, like in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
Castrol would be like an A-level card. Definitely. Like I would probably just give it a flat A.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think you should pick it as if it were a B-level card because of this.
Okay.
Because
it's a
you just
very
know
large tax. Yeah.
You just know drafting blue-white is not the way to approach this format. And at least that's what I believe right now. So the way I would get into birds is if I had some white cards and I got a 5th pick pack 1 Castrol, I'm like, okay, no one's drafting this. Everyone's trying to avoid it. And I got a 5th pick bomb. Yes, I can commit to that. Pick one, pack one. I mean, Inspired Rabbit is kind of like my bench line. That's the 2 and a white 3/2 with Offspring 1 that on ETB gives +1/+1. Like that card, I think is the best common.
It is,
and it's just a busted card. It's the Writhing Chrysalis of the set.
Yeah.
Pick one, pack one. You're obviously supposed to take Inspired Rabbit over Castrol, and that's not what I would have thought just looking at the spoiler. But
right.
that's how the format has played out. So, yeah, I would give Castrol a B. I would say that if the circumstances conspire to make this a card you can put in your deck, it is a very strong card. But I'm not looking to go down that road to start with.
Next is Vren the Relentless. This is 2 blue-black for a 3/4 legendary rat rogue at rare. It's got ward 2, and if a creature opponent controls would die, exile it instead. Well, that sometimes matters. It says at the beginning of each end step, create X 1/1 black rat creature tokens with this creature gets +1/+1 for each other rat you control, where X is the number of creatures your opponents controlled that were exiled this turn. Does the controlled part mean that it was on the battlefield?
Yeah.
So like if a card gets exiled from their hand, it won't trigger it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it wouldn't be a creature that they controlled when it's in their hand. So
gotcha. Okay.
This card suffers from some of the same issues as Castrol, which is that the Rats deck, I think, is not the best, kind of positioned, but it has some advantages. One, it doesn't really require other rats. You can just play this card. Like, yes, the rats it makes are bigger because of other rats, but you can just play this card and have it basically work without drafting a rat-focused deck, whereas Castrol does need birds to make it good. The other thing I like about Vren is that it's got ward 2 and it's somewhat kind of cheap. It provides you value as the game goes on. Like, it is a really strong card. So this is one of the reasons that would push me into blue-black rats. Again, if I got like a 3rd pick Vren after taking 2 black cards, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds totally legit. I'm not saying you can't draft these color pairs. I just think when you're looking at pick one, pack one, you kind of have to assume that, or like factor in how good the direction is, not just how good the card is. Vren is a very good card, and I think a mediocre direction, still a good card to take early. I would give this one a B+ instead of maybe I'd give this one even an A-. It's really an A-level card. So
okay.
I like Vren.
with the caveats about the color pair and such.
Yeah.
What does Gev Scaled Scorch do?
It does exactly what you want. It's red-black for a 3/2 lizard mercenary at rare. It has ward, pay 2 life, so it gets them no matter what. Other creatures you control enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each opponent who lost life this turn. So if you've hit them, then your creatures enter as you cast them with a +1/+1 counter, or as you make a token, whatever. And whenever you cast a lizard spell, Gev deals 1 damage to target opponent. So if you cast this and then you cast a lizard, the second part of the ability is on, so they're already going to get a +1/+1 counter. I mean, this is exactly what the red-black deck wants. I would just give it an A. Like, this is what all the rares we've seen so far are they push whatever creature type they're in. Except red black is really good, so Gev gets an appropriate bonus for that. So A for Gev Scaled Scorch. It is quite strong.
Two mana for a card with that much stuff is incredible. Next is the infamous Cruel Claw. This is 1 black red for a 3/3 legendary Weasel Mercenary at Mythic Rare. It's got Menace. And it says, when it deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. Whew.
So you're technically not up cards when you hit them, because you have to discard a card to cast it. There's no option to cast it normally. But you traded your worst card in hand for whatever your next non-land was, and the mana to cast it. You get spotted a Black Lotus or whatever.
You would do that all day. Yeah, that's absurd.
And 3 mana, 3/3 Menace is really good.
Like you could just hit a 4-drop and just discard a land and just have the 4-drop?
I mean, you could hit a 15-drop if you had one.
Wild. That's crazy.
I like A- for the infamous Cruel Claw. It gets a little worse as game goes on because it has to hit them. But casting this on turn 3 is just presenting your opponent with a question, which is, if you can't answer this, you're probably going to lose because you're just going to cast your top non-land. On turn 4, you're going to have 3 things in play.
Wow. That's awesome. Menace too. Next is Marera Trash Tactician. This is 1 green red for a 2/4 legendary Raccoon Warrior at regular rare. It says at the beginning of your first main phase, add red or green for each raccoon you control. Whenever you expend 4, you gain 3 life. That's interesting. And whenever you expend 8, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. That's actually kind of cool. That is not what I thought that this card would do. Being red-green and stuff. This is a little bit more of like a sit back, accrue value, buffer your life total, and start, paying you off for spending a bunch of mana. But that's a cool card.
Yeah, no, it is pretty neat. It adds a little bit of a different aspect to the Raccoon deck, and it's pretty good. 3 mana for a 2/4 that if it survives until your next turn, you get at least 1 mana, maybe 2 if you have another Raccoon in play, and then you're going to gain some life. And if you gain life enough times, yeah, you'll start to get to these exiling and getting to draw extra cards.
Does it fit?
Like in the red-green deck, like the red-green strategy and all that?
Right. Like, is this the kind of, like, if I told you, okay, we've got a legendary Raccoon for 1 green red, like, are you like, okay, yeah, this is good, this fits, this is kind of what I want to be doing? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Moira like plays out pretty nicely.
Okay.
And
what kind of
and you would always play this in your red-green deck.
Yeah.
Because you're going to naturally have a ton of raccoons, and the expend stuff works pretty well. Expend has ended up not really being my favorite mechanic. One of the problems I have with it is it's kind of the opposite of landfall. When you're in a top deck war, but you have a good landfall card out, like you're like, oh, if I draw a land, I get to trigger this. Mm-hmm. If I draw a spell, great, I drew a spell. Expend's like the opposite of that, where it's like, wow, I really need to draw a spell. Oh man, I drew a land. Now I'm really losing.
It compounds on itself. And this is funny too, because it's piling up mana for you. So you've got it all set, the table set.
No cards in hand. I'm untapping with Moira. What am I going to do? I have 9 mana.
Yep. And it's like land go. Yeah, that's pretty tough.
It is hard to expend 8, but I would give Moira.
Is it a B?
Or Muera. It actually looks like kind of like a Spanish word a little bit. But and morir is to die in Spanish, but
oh geez,
yeah, it doesn't. Basura is garbage, so trash is there's no call out to that.
Okay,
but
okay,
I would give this probably like a B+.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking really B+ range. Good card. Next is Hugs, Grizzly Guardian. Hugs has quite a mana cost. It's green, red X for a 5/5 legendary Badger Warrior at Mythic. It's got trample, and it says, when Hugs enters, exile the top X cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards, and you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Interesting. So the X in this case is purely optional. It doesn't affect Hugs as a 5/5 trampler for 4 mana. But, if you want to save up some extra mana, or particularly, probably more commonly, you won't have exactly red green. So it's like you got some extra mana floating around because of that, and then you can just dump it in. But I mean, on the turn when you can play it on 4, it's still a 5/5 trample, even if you don't need to get the extra card.
Yeah, and because it's until end of your next turn, you're not really losing out on these cards very often.
Yeah.
Imagine playing this on turn 5 for just 1 and then playing an extra land. Like that sounds pretty sweet. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you're getting good value. And then if you top deck this with 7 mana and play, it's obviously an incredibly good card. So it's very focused in red green, but like you said, you kind of don't mind if you miss for a few turns because it just means it's going to be better when you do play it. I would give Hugs an A-. I think Hugs is a really strong reason to be red-green.
I think so too.
I just like the combination of 4 mana 5/5 trample and big card draw spell. Even if you don't always get the 4 mana 5/5 part because you might not always exactly have red, green, but it's still pretty great.
Yeah, I think that I would just not view it as a 4-drop unless you get a little bit lucky. And if you do it that way, you're still going to be happy with it later in the game. Next is Phineas Ace Archer. This is green, white for a 2/2 rabbit archer at rare. It's got vigilance and reach. And it says, whenever Phineas attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control that's a token or a rabbit. Then if creatures you control have total power 10 or greater, draw a card. So do you kind of save this up? Like, do you play this on 2, but if it's going to trade, you just hang back until you get maybe 2 other, rabbits or tokens or whatever, and then start jamming with it, or combat trick to save it, or what's the play out?
There's a couple ways to play this. I think that the most common 2 ways are either you have an open lane where this can attack and survive, in which case it's just a no-brainer, right? You either use a trick or a pump spell or something like that means that it will survive, even if you have to trade a card because you're getting something. Or you just do the all right, last-ditch effort, Phineas goes in, I'm going to get 3 +1/+1 counters and draw a card, and then it's going to die. And maybe they have to put a blocker in front. Plus, imagine if your opponent attacks you with Phineas and gets 2 counters and draws a card off it, right? You're going to want to block it with more than just a 2/2 because you really need this thing to not survive combat, which opens the door to maybe doing a little bit of extra damage with the other stuff. So
sure,
I would give Phineas an A-. I think it's like a B+ A- card, and I'm bumping it to A- because I want to start in Rabbit. It's the best place to start.
Okay, so you see this and you're snapping it up. I mean, it's just a super push card across the board. Next is Lunar Convocation. This is white-black for an enchantment. It is rare. It says at the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, each opponent loses 1 life. And at the beginning of your end step, if you gained and lost life this turn, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. And you can pay 1 and a black to pay 2 life and draw a card. So kind of interesting. It does not give you the built-in life gain. That's the part that you're kind of responsible for, but it covers the rest.
Yeah, it gives you a way to lose life. So it triggers the bat token. Obviously, it pings them when you gain life, so you get additional value. And then a good thing to do when you've gained a bunch of life is pay life to draw a card. I like this card. This is the exact kind of card I like to play with, where it's you do some work, you get a little advantage on board, you get some cards, you're paying life, you're using your life as a resource, you're maneuvering things so you're able to use this card and gain life. It really rewards you for kind of planning out an efficient turn and having exactly enough mana to do all the stuff. This is just not the format for that kind of thing. I have to report. I'm not saying this card's not playable. It's a build around B. If I'm playing black-white and you give me the option of, hey, do you want a Lunar Convocation for your deck? I would almost always be like, yep, I definitely do. I would take this card, in the middle of the pack and think okay, this is a good reason to be in black-white. Would I first pick this card over Take Out the Trash or obviously Inspired Rabbit or any of the good cards that are just on board? No, I really can't advise that you do that. So
yeah,
I think that Lunar Convocation is a build around B. You should play it in your bat deck. You shouldn't be walking into a draft looking to be a little fiddly like this. Compare this to talent, the Hunter's Talent, right? The uncommon green saga or a level up card that fights and then gives ++, then draws a card. Mm-hmm. That's this card, except all upside, and it starts by giving you a significant board presence.
Yeah. And it's easier to cast.
Compare those cards,
It's just everything better. Yeah. Build around B for Lunar Convocation. That's a week 10 card right there. Next is Zoraline Cosmos Collar. This is 1 black white for a 3/3 flying vigilance legendary bat cleric at rare. And it says whenever a bat you control attacks, you gain 1 life. And it says whenever Zoraline enters or attacks, you may pay black white and 2 life. When you do, return target non-land permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Hey, I mean, yeah, I'm sure this is going to get a ding for the archetype, but the card itself is nice.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of does. I don't think bat's necessarily bad. I just think that like Lunar Convocation is a bit not on the board for my taste, but I think bats are reasonable.
Okay. Then Zoraline's really good.
And Zoraline's really good. Like Zoraline is a really, really strong card. 3 mana, 3/3, flying vigilance, gains life when you attack with any bat, including itself, of course, and it draws you extra cards effectively by paying life and mana to bring back cards from the graveyard.
Yeah, and
just
they go to the battlefield too. Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I would say B+ for Zoraline just on stats.
I would give it an A. Like I think Zoraline is just too strong of a card not to. And again, this is the kind of card that would put me into black-white. If I had 2 white cards or 2 black cards and then I saw this third pick, it seems like things are open. Like so far, the only decks that I wouldn't want to be in, even if I knew they were open, are like blue-red and blue-white. I think those are the two. Probably, honestly, it's blue-black is getting close to that, but really the blue decks are mostly not that good. I think Frogs is the best of them because green is really good, but Zoraline, totally I would be in for this.
Okay. Next is Ral Crackling Wit. This is 2 blue-red for a 4 loyalty legendary planeswalker Ral. It's mythic rare. It has a static ability that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a loyalty counter on Ral. And then it has a +1 loyalty, create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. -3, which does leave Ral on the battlefield, but barely. Says draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards. And then the ultimate, which is, achievable if you're completely built around because of the extra static, it's -10. Draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with instant and sorcery spells you cast have Storm.
Yeah.
That is cool. That is cool, but I mean, +1 make a token. That's kind of a tried and true recipe for a good planeswalker.
Yeah. 4 mana, you play this +1 it. It's got 5 loyalty and a 1/1 blocker. Pretty hard for it to die.
Yeah.
Most of the time when you cast it. The fact that when you cast a non-creature spell, it gets a loyalty counter means you can like -3 to find some spells and just cast some stuff. Great card. You know what I'm going to say next. So it suffers from being in a color pair that I think is not really going to get there very often. So would I see Ral as a reason to go into blue-red? Yeah, I would. I don't think it's going to happen because I think someone would have taken it. But if I got like a 5th or 6th pick Ral when I had some good red cards, I could see going that direction. Cards like this are hurt a little bit too by the fact that this isn't really a splashing format. Like I'm really down on the 3-color legends. Like we're going to see some of those, and I just think that you should just not take them mostly. Mm-hmm. So Ral's not splashable, or it's harder to splash it, and it's in a colored pair that I think is not the place to be. So honestly, Ral is like an A- level card that I would take probably around like a C level. I think
that's really tough.
Otter's getting back to sea level there. So
it's just tough too because they turned Ral into an otter. Like it's totally different.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
It's honestly pretty funny. Next one is also blue-red. This is Alania Divergent Storm. It's 3 blue-red for a 3/5 legendary otter wizard at rare. It says whenever you cast a spell, if it's the first instant spell, the first sorcery spell, or the first otter spell other than Alania that you've cast this turn, you may have target opponent draw a card. If you do copy that spell, you may choose new targets for the copy. So instant sorceries and otters get copied, but at the cost of giving your opponent cards.
Why did they have to?
Why?
To make you give them a gift? Would this card have been busted if it was just copy the first otter instant or sorcery you play?
I think so. I mean, it would have been good.
It would have been good, but not busted.
Sounds like they kind of needed it, bad. To be honest.
Honestly, this is like a D.
Yeah.
Like it's not a great card that puts you down a build around path that I don't think you really want to tread. So
Yeah.
I'm at D for Alania Divergent Storm.
Camellia, the Seed Miser, is 1 black-green for a 3/3 legendary squirrel warlock at rare. It's got Menace. And it says, other squirrels you control have Menace. And it says, whenever you sacrifice one or more foods, create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. And you can pay 2 and forage to put a +1/+1 counter on each other squirrel you control.
Camellia plays out really nicely. So a couple things that might not be obvious from like the first read is if you pay 2 and sacrifice a food to forage, you'll get a 1/1 from her ability, which will then get the +1/+1 counter, which is nice.
Get the rebate. That's nice.
Menace means it's like really easy to attack with your whole squad. And then sacking foods, which happens when you forage for other effects or just to gain life or whatever, just gives you the stream of squirrels. So Camellia is pretty great. She is a little bit not win more, but like she works well when the squirrels deck is working well. She doesn't really jumpstart you that well to do that because she needs food. She doesn't create food, but she gives you benefits for them. So the better you are at doing the squirrels thing, the better Camellia is going to be. But she starts out really good. 3 mana, 3/3 Menace, giving your squirrels Menace.
How nice big of a deal is giving the other squirrels Menace?
Yeah, there's some decent attackers. Giving your Corpseberry Cultivator Menace, I think, is pretty real.
Yeah.
Or you go like turn 2 Baker's Bane Duo, turn 3 this, attack past whatever they have immediately. Next turn, play a 4-drop, like do whatever. So I'd give Camellia an A. I also think Green Black Squirrels is awesome. A really good place to be.
So a good place to be, and this is a powered up rare for that deck. So A for Camellia. Next is Igra, Eater of All. This is 3 black green for a 6/6 legendary elemental cat at Mythic. It has ward. That is a very specific ward. It is sacrifice a food.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's like about as close to Shroud as you're getting, right? Or Hexproof or whatever. Just like many, many, many decks just can't make food, right?
I would read the rest of the card first.
Okay, I'll make the rest of the food. Other creatures are food artifacts in addition to their other types. Who could have seen that coming? And have the food thing, 2 tap sack, gain 3 life. And whenever a food is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Igra. This is amazing design. It just sees everything in the world as food.
I like it. I think it's.
I mean, you and I do too, so we can relate.
This is the kind of design that I really like, which is it tells a story. Like you can really get the flavor, like the literal flavor here.
Yeah, literal.
And also, I think plays pretty well. The ward is basically sacrifice a creature. Like if they have food out naturally, they could sacrifice it, but most of the time they're just going to sack a creature. Still, 5 mana 6/6 ward, sack a creature, and then it's going to be a 10/10 or 12/12 a lot of the time. Overprotect is really good at this, or Hunter's Talent. So, I mean, Yigra's great. This is one of the cards that you just put in your deck. Doesn't matter what else is going on.
Yeah, these off type elementals have been, very, very pushed. Is it an A?
Yeah, just a flat A.
Okay, 5 mana 6/6, hard to kill. Next is Mabel, Heir to Cragflame. This is 1 red-white for a 3/3 legendary mouse soldier at rare. It says other mice you control get +1/+1, and when Mabel enters, create Cragflame, a legendary colorless equipment artifact token with equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance, trample, and haste, and the equip cost on Cragflame is 2.
Mabel's awesome.
That's sweet.
This is exactly what the mouse deck wants. Pumps all your mice, is a 3/3 mouse, and gives you Cragflame as a way to target your stuff. Like, I think this card is just extremely strong and a very good reason to be in one of the best decks. So I would give an A to Mabel.
A for Mabel. Next is Clement the Worrywart. This is 1 green-blue for a 3/3 legendary frog druid at rare. It's got vigilance. And whenever Clement or another creature you control enters, return up to 1 target creature you control with lesser mana value to its owner's hand. And it says frogs you control have tap, add green or blue, spend this mana only to cast a creature spell.
So Clement's a good card for the blue-green deck, but is not a card that would put me into the blue-green deck.
Okay.
It is going to be around a B, basically.
So it's more of a payoff than like a lead you into it type thing?
Yeah, it's more of a good, like, this makes this deck work, but isn't a reason to want to go into the deck. So it's, I mean, 3-mana, 3/3 Vigilance is totally solid. Bouncing your own Pawn Profits is great, and Clement gives you the mana. So like, imagine in the middle of the game, you're just like, tap my Pawn Profit for mana, play this, or sorry, tap my Pawn Profit for mana, play a different creature, bounce it, replay it. I mean, you could actually play this. Its trigger goes in the stack. In response, you tap it, your Frog for mana because it has the ability. Bounce your Pawn Profit, replay it, and just kind of get good value overall.
Totally. And this thing taps for mana too, right? It gives itself the ability.
Yeah. So very solid card. I give Clement a B.
Okay. B for Clement the Worrywart. Next is Dream Dew Entrancer. This is 2 blue-green for a 3/4 frog wizard at rare. It's got reach. And it says, when it enters, tap up to 1 target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. If you control that creature, draw 2 cards.
I mean, this card is unbelievably good. 4 mana, 3/4 reach in a close game, like already it provides a good defensive play. But if you're beating them down, tapping a creature and putting 3 stun counters on it is like taking it out for probably the rest of the game. It's just like Kidnap. You kind of can't count on this thing coming back.
Right.
And then if you have a crappy creature in play, you can basically sack that creature to draw 2 cards, except in a few turns you even get the creature back.
Yeah.
And I mean, imagine this card if you have any ways to bounce it.
Totally.
Like turn 5, Dream Dew, tap your thing, Splash Portal, tap your other thing. What are they going to do?
Right.
Or if you're bouncing this and casting it multiple times, you could probably sneak in counter tapping one of your own things to draw those 2 cards while you're doing it. So
right, very flexible.
Dream Dew, see, this is the card. If I see this, I'm taking this and going frogs a lot of the time.
Okay.
I would give Dream Dew an A. I think it's a really strong card.
Yeah, huge board impact. 3/4 reach is nice stats too. Next is Balin the Haymaker. This is, okay, so now we're in the 3-color cards that you mentioned. So this one is red, green, white for a legendary rabbit warrior. It's a 4/3 at rare. And it says tap 2 untapped tokens you control to add 1 mana of any color. Tap 3 untapped tokens you control to draw a card. And tap 4 untapped tokens you control to put 3 +1/+1 counters on Balin the Haymaker and give it trample until end of turn. So talk about the big picture. You were saying that you're down on the idea of splashing these just regardless, right?
So yes, this is the one I'm most interested in because I already want Patchwork Banner in Rabbits. So you can get a red source out of that. And this has a pretty big impact the turn you play it. Like imagine you can just play this and immediately tap 3 tokens to draw a card. That is pretty good. If you can tap 4 tokens, this thing becomes like a pretty big threat. That said, I would basically never first pick this. If I was in green-white and I saw this late in the pack, I would take it just for speculation purposes. Maybe you pick up a couple pieces of fixing, but it's really like a C level card in terms of once you factor in the casting cost. If this card costs, green, white instead of red, green, white, yeah, the card would be like an A- or B+ build around. But as is, I think it's probably like a C.
And this is the one you're most interested in.
Yes, the other ones I am less interested in than this one.
let's look at the next one. It's Helga Skittish Seer. This is green, blue, white for a 1/3 legendary frog druid. This one's actually mythic rare. Balin's just a regular rare. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain a life, and put a +1/+1 counter on Helga. And then Helga can tap for X mana of any one color, where X is Helga's power, but you can only spend the mana to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana costs. It's just not worth it for you.
No, I just don't think.
Yeah.
First of all, the color issue means that you're not necessarily going to cast this on curve. In that case, you might not have creatures left to cast it.
Totally. And you're also giving up the pumpability. It needs to be on turn 3 when you play this to really maximize it.
I just don't want to splash a card that then needs other things to have it work. That just seems like a really bad plan to me.
Agreed. So, would you give it an F? I guess you would pick it at an F level, like you're just effectively never taking it, right? Yeah,
that's basically what I would say. Is I just don't like. If you get this card for free later in the pack, then
it's got some stuff.
Then maybe you'll put it in your deck, but not a card you should basically take. Like Helga is like a D or F level card when it comes to draft selection.
What about if you have the 2-drop that taps for any color, or the 3-drop that searches up a basic or whatever. Like where
the 3-drop just gets, or the
artifact,
land.
the food one. Yeah. Like, I mean, so I what I'm doing is I'm spotting you the ability to have 3 or 4, let's say you're playing blue-green and this is a splash for white sources, and you get a Helga super wheeled, it's your 10th pick or something. Are you going to play it at that point? Because that to me is the most viable use case, because you're not going to be picking this card early if you're us.
Yeah.
So would you play it in the case where you kind of have those sources? Like, is it worth putting in a deck that you could cast it in?
Maybe.
It's borderline still? Okay.
I would generally not be that interested, honestly.
I think that says it. Glarb, Calamity's Augur is next. Great name. It is black, green, blue, my favorite color trio in Magic. It's a 2/4 legendary frog wizard noble at Mythic Rare. It's got Death Touch. And it says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast spells with mana value, 4 or greater from the top of your library. And you can tap it to surveil 2. The card is awesome.
No, this one I like quite a bit more because
sweet.
First of all, 2/4 Death Touch is just a real thing.
Very
Second,
real.
When you play this, you might just get a card right away if a land is on the top of your deck. Mm-hmm. And tapping it to surveil 2, especially when combined with the ability, is basically, if you untap with a Glarb in play and you're starting your turn, I would be shocked if this didn't effectively draw you at least 1 card and probably closer to 2 by surveilling a bad card off the top and then playing a land and maybe, if you're lucky, a spell.
For sure. And the 2/4 Death Touch body enables itself to buy time to get the value going off the top of the library as well. So that's a nice combo. I mean, what if I gave you the same scenario I just gave you? You're in blue-green frogs, and you've got 2 mana tap for any color. You've got a 3 mana fixer. Are you going to go for the Glarb?
I'm splashing the Glarb. I'm going for the Glarb. I think that this card actually pays you off. Like, that's the difference. Is Helga may pay you off, but often will not. Glarb just will pay you off if it survives.
Going for the Glarb. I wish I could name this episode that. So what grade would you give it? Of course, have a big caveat on this about splashing it. And, I gave Luis a specific scenario where he already had mana fixing. And then would he take or play it? That isn't a given, right? You do have to work for cards like this. So the question becomes, it's pack 2, pick 4, and you're in blue-green and you see Glarb and a playable common in your color. Are you taking Glarb and trying to go for it?
I probably not, but I would be tempted.
So you're looking for free-ish?
At this point in time, I might try to do that just to see how it plays out.
Okay. But
I think generally, no, you're not going to want to do that.
I think that gives us a good feel for where you're at. Glarb's what, a B+? If you get to play it. Yeah. Next is Fabled Passage. It's a land, it's rare, you can tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Then, if you control 4 or more lands, you untap it. Fabled Passage is good. You were saying, though, that you don't think this is really a splashy format.
No, but you still want fixing in your 2-color deck, and you also, this does help for forage, so it gets a little better or threshold for rats or squirrels can care about that. So this is like a C+ level card.
Okay, C+ for Fabled Passage. Fountain Port is a land. It's also rare. It taps for colorless. You can pay 2 mana, tap it, and sacrifice a token to draw a card. You can pay 3 mana, tap it, and pay a life to make a 1/1 blue fish creature token. And you can pay 4 mana and tap it to make a treasure. It's kind of doing a lot.
I've liked this card.
Yeah.
The cost of playing a colorless land isn't like immense, especially if you are mostly just going to be in a 2-color format. And then you just use all the different parts of the card, I think, fairly well overall.
Yeah, I think so too. This is one of the I am really allergic to playing colorless lands in my limited decks. I think I would for Fountain Port. Like, being able to make tokens, like creature tokens, is a big game. The 2 tap sacrifice a token, that might be a thing. I don't know. It depends on your archetype. And then the 4 mana make a treasure could help you build up or splash or something. But I like 3 mana tap, pay a life, make a fish. Like, that's actually, board presence that I'm getting off of a land. So I'm interested. That said, I still only value it at like a C+ level. Like, I'm not jumping out of my seat to pick Fountain Port, but again, getting me over the line on you're going to play a colorless land in your limited deck is a feat in and of itself. So what kind of grade do you like for Fountain Port?
I might even give it like a B-. I just found it to be pretty good.
I haven't played with it yet, to be fair.
By itself, you're just like, make a token, sack the token to draw a card if the game stalls out. Making a treasure can help. Making a fish can still block, even if you have to pay a life. So yeah, I'd like Fountain Port. It's not a bomb, but I think it's a nice addition to your deck based on the cost versus the reward.
So C plus B minus range for Fountain Port. Last land is Three Tree City. This is a legendary land. It's rare. And it says, as it enters, choose a creature type. It taps for colorless, but you can pay 2 mana and tap it to choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to the number of creatures you control of the chosen type. Is this something we're interested in for limited?
This card is, I'm trying to think of how I could convince people listening to never, ever consider putting this card in their deck. I mean,
that answered my question, didn't it?
In order for this to generate mana, more than one, right? To more than just be a land, you have to have 4 creatures of that same type.
Oh, that's terrible.
4.
That's
and
really
when you
bad.
do you get 1 extra mana?
Yeah.
The
and you have to choose a color too.
Obscenely bad.
Yeah. Okay. F for Three Tree City. Let's just say we needed a 4th tree to make it worth it. That's really bad.
Yeah.
We do have a bonus sheet. It's not too many cards. They were pretty merciful. I'm curious to see how this plays out because I've really enjoyed the full bonus sheets that they've done. And it looks like we don't have one this time around, but we get the extra special whatevers here. And these are all reprints, but there's some bangers in here. First off, best removal spell of all time, literally, Swords to Plowshares. It's white for an instant, exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power.
I mean, this card is just absolutely off, just unreal. Yeah. So, yeah, Swords to Plowshares gets an A, as you would expect.
These are all listed as mythic rares, and they show up even less frequently than a regular mythic rare, so keep that in mind. Next is Ledger Shredder. This is the 1 and a blue 1/3 bird advisor with flying, and whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, it connives, which lets you draw a card, then discard a card, and if you discard a non-land card, this thing picks up a +1/+1 counter. I mean, this would be awesome in the blue-red deck. Just play some cantrips or whatever, play a couple of spells to get your prowess stuff going and get your Ledger Shredder rolling while you're at it. Good card. It's bird also. Yeah, really, I don't know.
It's efficient. Like I would play this in any blue deck.
Yeah. I mean, it's a B, right?
You get really good value out of this.
Yeah. So B for Ledger Shredder. It even plays a little better than that in some decks. Next is Rat Colony. This is 1 and a black for a 2/1 rat. And it says Rat Colony gets +1/+0 for each other rat you control. A deck can have any number of cards named Rat Colony. Not really relevant for us in any way, but rats is a theme. So you could have a 2 mana 4/1 or something.
It's really not good. This is like a D.
I tried.
It doesn't get +1/+1. It gets +1/+0. It doesn't really do anything, which somehow leads us to our next special guest, which is another rat. It's Relentless Rats. 1 black for a 2/2 rat. It gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield named exactly Relentless Rats, not just all rats. And you can have as many copies as you want in your deck.
So that's just unplayable, right? I mean, 3 mana for a 2/2, even if it's on type.
Yeah.
I would say Relentless Rats is just an F here.
I know this is mostly a reprint because I think the card's valuable, and this is a way to get more.
It is. This is a special one for people that want to have 100 of these or whatever. Kindred Charges next. It's 4 red for a sorcery. It says choose a creature type. For each creature you control of the chosen type, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. That is powerful. It doubles your board if you're on type the whole way.
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't think I really like it.
I'm not really into this thing. This seems like an ultimate win more. Like, yeah, if you've got a bunch of creatures of the same type, then you can cast this and attack with them. But like, is that really going to happen?
No way. Also, we've been giving out A+ for cards that catch you up when you're behind. This is the opposite.
Yeah.
I would just not put this card in my deck, honestly. Like, I would just give it an F. Like, I just don't see where this is going to win. Next is Sylvan Tutor. This is green for a sorcery. It says search your library for a creature card, reveal it, then shuffle and put that card on top.
This is an F. Like, spending a mana and a card to go to draw the creature you want is just such a bad deal. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. There is no bomb that you would play a Sylvan Tutor alongside, right? Like that scale doesn't work for you.
I don't think so. If I had a deck that, like, maybe they had a deck that couldn't beat a specific card I had, I would, like, consider it. But that just really doesn't seem realistic to me.
So bad, and it's the next turn, yeah. So F for Sylvan Tutor. Next is Toski, Bearer of Secrets. This is 3 and a green for a 1/1 legendary squirrel. It can't be countered. It has indestructible, and it attacks each combat if able. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card.
Toski's quite strong. Like,
Toski's kind of cool.
If you can get in there, like if you have an open attack the turn you draw Toski and can play it, then you end up in a pretty nice spot because you just immediately draw a card. He gets 1 turn of blocks. He's been grizzled since his time on Kaldheim, though. Look at this guy.
Yeah, he's got the big braided beard going.
And if every, like, the worst case scenario with Toski is like them not being able to attack you on the ground the 1 turn, and then you can't attack in, so it just attacks for nothing. They block with a 2/2 every turn. But if you ever open the door, then you just win. And I mean, there's some boards where you play this and draw multiple cards. Like, that's some part of the equation too. So
if you're swarming, if you have menace, you can back it up with combat tricks pretty well. They do kind of have to block Toski every turn. It is a little tax that you put on them.
Yeah.
Because, it'll draw cards off it too. Toski is pretty good. It is not amazing, but it is pretty good. And I think it would fit in the Squirrels theme actually pretty well.
Yeah. If you have like a
bee?
Big Corpse-Fairy Cultivator out, then you can attack.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. We've seen some of the Squirrels that give menace and then any type of removal combat trick stuff to clear the way, even for a turn, just starts to pay you back and it kind of snowballs. Yeah. I would say B for Toski.
That's exactly what I would say as well.
Frogmite, 4 mana for a 2/2 artifact creature frog with affinity for artifacts. This is just a joke, right? They're like,
is indeed a frog.
Frogs are here, so here you go. That's pretty funny. I think that the joke is good and it was worth a spot on special guests. But that being said, I would give Frogmite an F. I don't think you're ever going to play it in an actual deck. Oh boy. Now we get the big hitter. Sword of Fire and Ice, 3 mana. Sophie is it's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, and it has protection from red and from blue. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, Sword of Fire and Ice deals 2 damage to any target, and you draw a card, and the equip cost is 2. This is one of the OG swords, and it's considered one of the best ones. It's a little rough that it happens to hammer the worst deck already. It's like, hey, you thought Otters was bad, right? Well, here's just this random Sword of Fire and Ice to just put the nails in the coffin every once in a while when somebody gets lucky enough to open one.
Yeah, I mean, Sword is really strong. If you play against the colors that it impacts, you can easily just run them over with it, and
it's pretty good even outside of that.
And it's just a strong card. Like, if you hit them with it, like, you get a pretty significant boost from that.
Huge. Does this sword hold up? Because we have seen that these swords have fallen out of favor a little bit, or they're, the ones they've printed lately haven't been quite as powerful. But this is one of the core. This might even be the most iconic of the sword. Of all these type of swords with this formatting. Does it hold up?
Yeah, I think it holds up fairly well.
I think so too. And it's also, colorless. Like, it references colors, but it's colorless. So, any deck can pick it. I think any deck should. I mean, I'd give Sword of Fire and Ice an A at face value. Like, I'd need to play it, I guess, to see how it holds up in a fairly fast, modern, limited format. But whatever. I'm starting it at A. I would not be passing Sword of Fire and Ice.
Yeah, I agree. I'd probably give it like an A-, but it is very good.
Secluded Courtyard is our last card. It is a land, and it says, as Secluded Courtyard enters, choose a creature type, taps for colorless, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast the creature spell of the chosen type, or activate an ability of a creature source of the chosen type. That actually seems pretty good in this format. I
think it's probably worse than a basic land most of the time.
You think so? I guess you're right. It is mediocre fixing.
I mean, in your red-white mouse deck, it's like,
Yeah.
yes, this is a red-white land for mice exactly, but it can't cast spells or non-mice.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're
except for
totally
colorless.
right.
Yeah.
I got a little hopeful, but it's actually just worse than
You're just not getting a bonus out of it, you know?
Yeah. So you're saying there's no upside. Okay. But there is a downside. Yeah. I would say F then for Secluded Courtyard. I would not actually run this card in any deck. Okay. Format seems pretty fast so far, Luis.
Definitely is.
I think we're back in the saddle again as far as, pressure time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's call it a show there. Let us know what you think. I'm curious what you think of all of these cards. You can find us on social media. Marshall_LR for me and Luis is LSV pretty much everywhere. You can find everything related to our podcast at lrcast.com. You can check out our sponsor, Ultimate Guard, at their website or at your favorite online retailer or local game store. And thanks once again to all of our patrons. We'll be back next week with the format overview.
All right. I got to tell you a recipe that I'm obsessed with that I know you will love.
Okay.
It's corn ribs. And you probably heard me talking about them already.
I have a link for it on my thing because of you. So yes, I am stoked for corn ribs.
So they're really easy to make, but they have really enhanced my appreciation of the classic corn on the cob. So all you do to make corn ribs, and you can Google a recipe very easily, but I can explain it to you really quickly. You take a corn cob, you shuck it, you take all the outer leaves off and all that, the corn silk and all that. You wash it off. Mm-hmm. Cut the top and the bottom so that they're flat, which is, again, not that different from normal. You're just cutting the ends off. And that's so you can put it vertically on a cutting board and then cut it top to bottom. So now it's in half, right? It's a cylinder, but now it's cut exactly in half. Uh-huh. And then do that again so they're each in quarters. So it's basically, if you looked at the corn from the top vertically, it got cut in half and then vertically and horizontally.
So kind of a triangle.
Every corn cob is now 4 individual little corn ribs. And then toss them in like a little bit of olive oil and then grill them. And then I usually toss them with like tahini, which is like the kind of elote seasoning. So tahini, and then you can put like, if you want like some kind of like butter or oil, so so it sticks, and then you can put like cotija cheese and cilantro on, and that's elote. But even if you don't do all that, just grilling them with olive oil and whatever, salt and pepper or whatever spice of your choice. If you want like barbecue seasoning or more spicy, what that does is they kind of curl, so like a smile. And then you grab them. You still don't eat the middle, right? That's not different. Like that's just not a good part of the corn to eat. But you can eat the rib off that, and you end up in a spot where you would get to enjoy the corn rib, but it's not a huge portion because each cob makes 4 of them. So what I found, like for like kids or people with smaller appetite, they can have 1 or 2. They don't have to have a whole cob and then take 6 bites out of it and then no one eats the rest.
Right.
And they're just really fun to eat. It's a much more pleasurable eating experience. So really, it's not that different from grilled corn, but I found that this makes me enjoy it quite a bit more.
I'm in. Sold.